Karma, you're currently not muted.
Okay. You tell me when you're ready to go, Tina, and we'll get her going.
I'm ready to go and we looks like we've got 13 people in right now, so I imagine people will start trickling in.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Karma Hansen, and I'm the coordinator for Safe Kids Grand Forks. We are joined today by a great panel of people that really are kind of experts in the area of childhood injury prevention, particularly in the home. And throughout the day, you're going to meet some of those folks. I would like to first introduce my colleague who works at the Safe Kids office with me. She came to us from a public health arena. And Tina, many of you may know her from her work with wheeled sports and pedestrian safety, but she also heads up our home safety portfolio. And while all of us on our team at Safe Kids kind of do all the areas, we kind of have a team lead, and Tina is that person. She has been largely responsible for helping us get this training set up and ready to go for today. You will also be meeting, I know Sarah Meyer is on here right now. Some of the other presenters are going to come and go when it's their turn to present. But Sarah is just an absolute gem. She is a nurse who used to work here at Altru. She now works for Child Care Aware and works in homes or child care centers where children are being cared for and they're licensed. And Sarah is one of the nurse educators, and her extensive knowledge in the area of home safety topics is just an incredible value to our team. And so we are very blessed that each time we do this training that Sarah lends her expertise to this. And so you will get to hear from her a little bit later. I'm going to kick it off today with kind of an introduction to how this all got started, and then some basic concepts about injury prevention. And so we kind of all come with the same understanding. I have asked if each of you would put your name and agency in the chat box. We'd like to see where people are coming from. We'll also send out certificates when we're done, and Tina will talk more about the logistics of that once we kind of get further into the day, but and as we wrap up the day. But for right now, go ahead and put your first and last name, your agency you're with, and if it's not obvious, maybe what community you're from as well, so we know where people are joining us from. If you do have a large group that are watching at your site, if you would maybe send us a list of who's all in the room with you, because it looks like there might be one computer, but there could be lots of people behind that, and we'd just like to get a sense of who is being trained today. So again, my name is Karma Hansen. I'm the coordinator of Safe Kids Grand Forks. I'm a nurse by background. I've had the privilege of serving as the coordinator for Safe Kids Grand Forks for almost 30 years. And we are just going to kick off with a little bit of a launch of how this program all got started. Safe Kids Grand Forks is based out of Altru Health System. You will see today as Tina and I present, we are in two different places, and we did that intentionally so we weren't both presenting and competing with each other as we were talking. So you might hear us, we do work together, we're on the same team, but you might hear us giving instructions because we are not in the same room. So go to the next slide, Tina. Next one. Tina sent this handout out to you. It is a resource request list, if you will. As we go throughout the day today, you are going to find that we are going to put up some paper material or display materials or poster materials that we have available to us. And we wanted to be able to give you a sense of how you could order those items from us. You will notice in the far left-hand column, there is something called a document number. If you go to our website, which is safekidsgf.com, and you may want to pull that website up if you've got another computer near you, all of the materials that we show you today are going to be things that you can find on our website. That being said, if you go to usually the backside or the bottom right-hand corner, there will be a document number on it, and it will start usually with the number 6053. That's our Safe Kids Cost Center. Then there will be a dash, and then it will have another 4-digit number behind it. If you can give us that 4-digit number, that would be, or 8-digit number, that would be super helpful to us because that would help us to find the document that you're looking for. You can also put the brochure topic in there. So you might say something like poisoning or medication or heat stroke or playground. That will also help us. And then if you would like to get handouts or copies of these materials, if you would put the number that you need in there. Up at the top of that, you will see a name, a spot for a name, an email, an agency, and a phone number. If you are from out of town, we would also need you to put your mailing address on there. We will work to get those out. Tina is not in the office on Fridays, typically, so we will get those materials out to you next week. What would be really helpful is, rather than putting in the chat, can I get 100 of these and 100 of these? Don't put that in the chat. Instead, put that on that resource request sheet and turn that into us at the end of the day, just so that it becomes less things that we need to be sitting there monitoring throughout the day in the chat. We don't want to lose it when it comes time to send them. Next slide. So this is a document that shows what we're talking about that number down on the bottom. You'll see it's listed as 6053. This one happens to be 0369. That would be the number that we're looking for. So if you could put that in there and then maybe say something like dog safety tips or something like that, that would be helpful. So thank you, Tina. Next one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Safe Kids. We are a coalition. We are based at All True Health System, but we are an organization that is we cover Northeast North Dakota and Northwest Minnesota, and we are a part of a global network team. That team is based out of Washington, D.C., and it was started by a pediatric trauma surgeon. His name was Dr. Marty Eichelberger. And Dr. Eichelberger was seeing patients coming into his ER in Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And he said, you know what? I can continue to sew these kids up or do surgery or go to the lobbies and tell parents that their children are not going to survive. Or if I really want to make a difference, I can try to do some work to prevent these injuries from occurring. The number one cause of death in children is actually preventable injuries. And so he set out to form a grassroots coalition across the country that was made up of organizations coming together to say, what can we do to reduce the number of preventable injuries? And so Safe Kids Worldwide was launched about 35 years ago. Safe Kids Grand Forks is 32 years old. And we bring together, while All True Health System is the lead agency, we bring together anybody within our arena or our part of the state who says, I want to be a part of the work that you do to reduce preventable injuries. So we have people from law enforcement, and as I said, Sarah from Child Care Aware, from our Grand Forks County, from public health, from law enforcement, fire, schools, a whole host of agencies, Game and Fish, businesses, service clubs, a lot of nonprofit organizations who say, you know what, hey, we do work with children and preventable injuries. We would like to be a part of the work that you do. Here's my ask to you. If today we talk about something that inspires you and you say, gosh, I would love to be a part of this or help in more ways, please put that in the chat box or reach out to Tina or me following this, because we're always looking for new people. We will talk about some of our subcommittees here in just a minute that you can be a part of, but we do, our team does meet monthly and we meet both in person and virtually. And so you can join us every single month to have a connection with the work that we do, or even just to keep up on what is the latest and the best practice as it relates to, say, for example, button batteries or medication safety or playground safety, so that you can be providing the clients and people that you work with that best practice information. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So you will see, oops, I think go back one, Tina. Yep, there we go. So our focus is all on reducing the number of preventable injuries. As I said, preventable injuries are the #1 cause of death to children under age 19. If you look at the little boy here on the slide, you'll see that there are all the other causes of death for these kids, and you will see that preventable or unintentional injury, sometimes the lay public refers to it as accidents. We prefer to say unintentional injury. Those make up the biggest cause of death for children under age 19. So if your clientele involves children, I would say you should be placing a focus on those unintentional injuries if you really want to make an impact in the health and wellness of those people. Next slide. As I said, we're a part of a global coalition. Safe Kids Worldwide was started in Washington, D.C., but it has grown all across the United States. There's over 400 coalitions across the United States. And as we started to meet as coalitions around the United States, we found that there were people from around the globe who started to say, gosh, these are drowning is common in my country, or motor vehicle crashes are common in my country. Can we join your effort? And so you will see that we are in not only all the states in the United States, but in over 30 countries around the world as well. Next slide. We work with a lot of fabulous coalitions in North Dakota. You will see the purple coverage area is the area that Safe Kids Grand Forks covers. The blue area is Safe Kids Fargo Moorhead, and they are led by Sanford Health out of Fargo. They have been around almost as long as Safe Kids Grand Forks, just a little over 30 years. And then we have 2 new coalitions out in the West, Safe Kids Bismarck Mandan and Safe Kids Minot. Safe Kids Minot is led by Trinity Health in Minot, and Safe Kids Bismarck Mandan is led by Sanford Health in Bismarck. Fabulous coalitions that do great work. We do a lot of very similar stuff, but we also do things that are different as well. I would encourage you, if you go to our webpage, that's safekidsgf.com, along the top, you'll see some little bubbles. And on the far right-hand side, there is a bubble. It's called Contact. And if you click on that link, that will get you to our webpage that shows the names and the contact information for those coordinators in those other communities that are doing just outstanding work. And if you your agency is close to them and you would like to connect with them with their monthly meetings, please reach out to them, because I know they would love to have you join their efforts as well. I will say that in March, you might want to mark your calendar. March 27th, it's a Wednesday, from 8:30 to 4:30, our 4 coalitions are going to be holding a virtual injury prevention symposium. It'll be all online, it's free of charge, and we are going to be showcasing topics including safe sleep, farm and rural safety, water safety, bike, and pedestrian safety. I'm forgetting some of them. I apologize. But we will be getting more information out about that really soon, and you will be able to, again, meet the coordinators who are a part of those coalitions that you see here on this coverage map slide. Next slide. This slide here shows the locations in which we have coalitions across the United States, and you will see also the global map where we have coalitions around the world in the countries that are listed there in green. And so we are a huge global network that does a lot of work all around the world. Next slide. Safe Kids Grand Forks is made up of 5 different subcommittees, and we're going to just showcase those really quickly. One of them is child passenger safety or motor vehicle safety. We do a lot of work with the car seat checkup events around the region. We also do work, you'll see here on the left, an image of a vehicle where we've got a heat stroke thermometer showcasing the inside temp of that vehicle and the outside temp. I will tell you, we just wrote a grant, and I'm just in the process of purchasing 2 new heat heat stroke temp displays like that. There will be one, we have one that is shown here in Grand Forks. We are getting one that will be available in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and then one out on the western part of the state. So on that little resources sheet, if you think that maybe during the summertime you would like to have this display that could be in your parking lot or something like that, write that on that sheet, reach out to Tina and me afterwards and find out how you can connect with that tool or that resource, and we'll get you connected with that for the 2024 summer season. So child passenger safety, if you are interested, like I said, in joining our full coalition that meets it's now going to be the second Thursday of the month, you can let us know that. Put that in the chat box. Or if you're interested in joining any of these subcommittees, they also meet virtually as well. So child passenger safety and motor vehicle is one of them. Next slide. Pedestrian safety and wheeled sports. This is the arena in which Tina is our coordinator. We do a lot of work about safety around schools, bus safety, wheeled sports such as scooters, skateboards, rollerblades, bikes. We do bike rodeos. And so that is another committee that meets routinely. Next one. Home safety. Home safety is a subcommittee that deals with lots of topics, from fires and burns to safe sleep, choking, poison, button batteries, TV tip overs, safe sleep. You're going to hear about a lot of the arenas that we work in today when we go through our home safety training with you today. So next slide. The last one is sports safety. This one deals a lot with concussions, hydration, overuse injuries. We do a lot of training of coaches within our region and getting information out about concussion and hydration awareness. Next slide. Water and outdoor recreation. Drowning is a major area of focus in which we do work. Our water safety focuses on that, both in lakes, rivers, streams, that kind of thing, but also home water safety. And we also do outdoor recreation, things like ATVs, snowmobiles, and that kind of thing. So if any of those are subcommittees you're interested in, please reach out to us and we'll find a way to get you connected with them. Next slide. This just shows the many risk areas. This is not all of them, but if your public health agency or your school or wherever you hail from is doing work in any of these areas, we likely have resources, materials, tools that we can share with you. And again, use that resource sheet that we gave you to write down. Maybe you see on there, oh, railroad safety. I wonder what they do with the railroad. We're not going to be covering that topic today, but if that's an area that you would like more information, write that on your resource sheet, get that turned in to Tina or me, and we will reach out to you and say, hey, I see you're interested in railroad safety or weather safety. How can we help? Or what tools might we have that we could share with you? So that's a little bit of an overview about our coalitions. I'm going to have Tina go to the next slide and we'll start on how this project all came to be. All right, go ahead to the next slide. Many years ago, there was, as I told you, our partner organization, Safe Kids Worldwide, got a grant from the CDC, and they put this grant opportunity out for the coalitions around the country. And Safe Kids Grand Forks was one of 10 to receive this grant in the whole United States. We were working when we wrote the grant with the Spirit Lake tribe in the Devil's Lake area. And then we also worked with the Healthy Families. That was a home visitation program. Home safety was a topic that was somewhat new to us. And so we wanted to partner with agencies that we knew were already doing work within the homes. Next slide. Many of the programs or work that Safe Kids did was people coming to us. They'd come to our car seat checkup event, or we'd go to their school and do education, or they'd come to a community event or fair. This was a really new concept for us in that we were now going to be saying we wanted to get into the homes of at-risk clients, maybe low income, maybe not having a lot of resources, maybe low education levels, and we wanted to help them out in the home environment to make that environment a little bit safer for their families. And so, because we did not necessarily have a relationship with some of those at-risk low-income clients, we wanted to connect with agencies that did. And that's how we got connected with Healthy Families and with the Spirit Lake Tribe, because they knew these families, they were connected to them, they were in the homes, they were working with them. And so we, those three entities came together to say, how can we launch this program? Next slide. As I said, we were one of 10 sites from across the country that was chosen. And so we headed off to Washington, D.C. to receive some training. Next slide. We received $10,000, and that money was set aside to use for equipment and supplies and materials, home safety devices that we could put into homes to make them safer. So things like baby gates or cabinet locks, gun locks, things that we're going to talk about kind of a lot today as we go through this training. I will say that $10,000 was spent long ago, but we have in the past also received some funding from our Grand Forks United Way. We sometimes have some resources available to us. For example, we had a medication grant in which we got cabinet locks, that we have those that we make available for free. We're going to talk about some of the things that we would have available. We sometimes also have access to buy home safety devices at a cheaper price than maybe somebody else could get it. So we'll talk about some of those materials today and let you know how, after you've taken this training, if you are a part of our service area, that purple area that you saw on the screen, how you may be able to access some of those materials that we have. Next slide. The people from Healthy Families and myself then headed off to Washington, D.C., where we conducted training in how do we do home safety inspections and make them valuable. And so we'll share some of those tips with you today. Next slide. Our goal of the Safe Kids at Home program was really to increase awareness about home injury and improve child health through outreach to families in our community. And we still are working on that goal today. Next slide. We decided that what we wanted to do was we wanted to train home visitors in how to conduct a home safety checklist. And then we wanted to be able to provide safety devices and education to families in need. This training that you're getting today is the training that we provided to those home safety or those home visitors 20 years ago to do these home visits. Now, obviously, we've added content to this and we've updated it. But that being said, we are focusing on things that we felt were instrumental in the home. This program needs to be more than just about here's a bunch of cabinet locks, take and put them in the home, or here's a smoke alarm, put it up. Excuse me. We need to be providing not only the safety devices to people, but we need to be providing them the education. So yes, we want to put up smoke alarms, but we also want to talk to them about fire escape planning and having a meeting place outside, and how often do you need to check the batteries? When do you need to replace the alarm? Do they know that they need to be sleeping with their doors closed? All of the stuff that we're going to talk about in our training today is why we say if you're going to have access to those safety devices, you need to have taken this home safety training, because we want you to not just give out the devices, but provide them with accurate information about how to be safe within the home through not only devices, but education as well. Next slide. With these home safety devices, our goal has always been that the people that are requesting them, meaning that home visitor, is the person that we want to help with installation of those devices. We don't want them to just get put in a bag. We know that if these are low-income clients, Number one, they may not have the tools needed to put that smoke alarm up. They may not have the time. They may not have, they may be a single mom trying to raise 4 kids on their own, work 2 jobs, and when are they going to find time to do some of that? So our goal is to make sure that we don't just say to people, oh, go by the Safe Kids office and pick up these safety devices. That's the home visitor that connects with us to get those devices. When we have them ready, we will let you know that they're available for pickup. And then you take responsibility on one of your home visits to get those devices installed and put up in use in that home. Many of these are inexpensive, but some of them are expensive, and we don't want them sitting there in a bag or a box in which we've distributed them. A smoke alarm, carbon monoxide detector is going to do no good if it's not put up and used properly. Next. One of the things that we also had with our program is that we wanted to generate public awareness about our program and about home safety in general. If you have not liked our Facebook page, I would encourage you to do that. I'm going to give you 3 things right now that I want you to think about doing. Number one, join our coalition, because we talk about a lot of these topics here and make you aware of that. So shoot us a message or put that on your resource sheet. Number 2, I would encourage you to go on and like our Facebook page. It's Safe Kids Grand Forks, and Tina can pop that link into the chat box where you can like our page. I would love it if you and your agency would share some of the posts that we do, because it helps to spread that messaging that we put up with your clientele and your part of the state as well. So we put up a lot of information on home safety, oftentimes around months or weeks of recognition. For example, March is National Poison Prevention Month or week. We celebrate all month. That's a great time to get information out about poison safety. If you can follow along, both personally and through your agency, to our Facebook page and help us share those posts, get those out, that would be super helpful to us. The third thing I'm going to ask you to do is go to our webpage, and Tina can put this link in also. On our front page, if you go to safekidsgf.com, along the right-hand side of our page, you will see where you can sign up for our newsletter. That newsletter comes out electronically once a quarter, so summer, winter, spring, and fall. We just published our winter newsletter, and if you'd like to find that, if you're on our website, across the top, you'll see a link, a little bubble. It's called News. If you go to that link, you'll be able to go back and find all of our past newsletters. And I know Tina is super on the ball here. She could probably even pop that link into the chat box as well. But if you go to the link that Tina just put in to sign up for our newsletter, you will get emailed that when those come out once a quarter. Our next one is actually going to come out right after the first of the year, and it's going to have all of our posters and flyers and materials for our babysitting classes, our car seat checkup events, our med take back events, our foster parent training, and all that kind of stuff that will be coming out in that January edition. Next slide, Tina. I'm giving you guys lots of homework and we've just barely started. Talk about generating a lot of activity and to-do lists. That's what this day is going to be all about. And one of our last things that we wanted to do was to build partnerships with organizations and businesses that share a common safety goal. I will tell you, Sarah Meyer is my phone a friend. If I run into an issue of a question that somebody calls us about, and I don't know the answer, or maybe I just want to bounce something by, I know I can reach out to Sarah. I know I can reach out to my friends at public health agencies or a variety of our partners that we work with. The sheriff's department is my gun safety go-to. Our fire department is our fire safety go-to. And they are the leading experts in a lot of these areas. And so I don't feel like I need to be a gun expert because I have law enforcement people on my coalition that are, and we lean on them. So the partnerships that we have within our Safe Kids network is incredibly valuable to making sure that we are sharing the most up-to-date, current, and best practice recommendations in the industry. So those are some of the goals of this program. And if you go to the next slide, Tina, this will talk a little bit about what our training objectives are today. To train people in home visitation, give an overview of unintentional injuries, how to conduct a home safety inspection, how to install and use home safety devices, talk about resources that are available, and also to network with community members and experts. With that, I would like to pause for just a minute so I'm not the only one doing talking. And I would like to have, if we could, each of you take your camera off, and I would love to have you introduce yourselves. I know you've put your name and information in the chat box, but if you guys could come off, come onto camera really quickly and just let us know who is here and joining us today. Tina, if you want to call them out maybe by the order that they're listed on the slides, that would be really helpful since you've got that pulled up. So
Absolutely.
let's go ahead.
Bonita, want to introduce yourself? Bonita?
Hi, I'm Bonita. I'm from Lake Region District Health here in Devil's Lake. I'm a public health nurse.
Great, thank you. Brittany. How about Brittany?
Hi, I'm Brittany Corbett. I work for Polk County Public Health. I'm an RN and I am based out of our East Grand Forks office.
Perfect, thank you. Kayla. Kayla Carlson.
I'm Kayla. I work with Richland County Health Department. I'm the administrator there, so I know we're under the Fargo region, but it seemed like a good opportunity to get some good information, so I thought I'd hop on today.
Great. Elise?
Hi, I'm Elise. I apologize. I had surgery yesterday, so I'm in bed. So that's
Glad you're here.
yeah, no, I wasn't gonna miss this for anything, but and that's what I told everybody. I am Elise. I work at the Grand Forks Housing Authority on a family property. So
Great. Wendy. Wendy
Hi,
Freeling?
I'm Wendy Freilich from Lake Region District Health.
Perfect.
And-
Chantel? Oh, I'm sorry, Wendy.
Nope, go ahead. I'm fine.
Okay. Chantel.
I'm Chantel Froelich. I am with the North Dakota Department of Human Services Foster Care Licensing Unit, and I am based in Lisbon.
Great. Kate.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kate Goldaddy. I'm with Grand Forks Public Health.
And
Perfect.
Kate is one of our fabulous partners that's on our coalition. We're happy to have her. And
Nice to
I
meet
want to, before you go on, Tina, Chantel, I want to connect with you before the end of the day is over. Make sure that I share with you, and I don't remember, Tina, if we put it in the presentation, but during COVID, Safe Kids Grand Forks started offering training to foster parents via Zoom so that they can get their required continuing ed credits free of charge in their home on a variety
She
of...
says she has it.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. Want to make sure that you have that. And also all of the agencies that are on here, we'll make sure that we share it so that, because it's not just for foster parents, it is for really anybody. So if you see a topic listed and you would like to join that month's conversation, we'd love to have you.
I have a really quick question on that, though. I had a foster parent who participated in many of them over the past year and loved it, and noticed that some of the topics for this next year are the same. Is it the same training or just similar topics?
I would say it's similar.
Okay.
Like, for example, child passenger safety, we could do a different topic on child passenger safety every month of the year and not hit everything. So it's generally going to be different information. That's a great question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And now that being said, there will be a little bit of overlap, right? Like there's only so many ways you can teach Halloween safety, right? But that being said, we do not provide the exact same one. And if we did, we would note that.
All right. Introductions continue. Haley.
Hello. Oh, gotta fix the microphone. Sorry. Hi there. I'm Haley Claypack. I am here with Childcare Aware of North Dakota.
Perfect. Thank you. Jill.
Hi, good morning. I am Jill Perkowitz. I am out of East Grand Forks, Polk County Public Health, and I am the school nurse for Fisher, Climax, Our Saviors, and Cathedral Schools.
Awesome. And we're glad to have Polk County Public Health as one of our partners as well on our coalition.
Jim.
Jim Hoagie, foster parent with PATH for 30 years, and we have 2 grandchildren, daughters that are with us almost full time, and age 2 and 3 years old. So this is very applicable.
Perfect. Caitlin.
Hey there, Katie Reiners, Health and Safety Specialist with Childcare Aware of North Dakota.
Great. Kathy.
Kathy Reitmeyer, Polk County Public Health. I'm a family home visitor based in Crookston and kind of all over Polk.
Great. How about Lee?
Hi, I'm Lee. I'm out of Dickinson at Head Start, Early Head Start, and I'm also a home visitor.
Great. Charlotte? Do we have Charlotte on? All right, perfect. How about Risa?
Hi, Risa Gamliel. I work with Ann Carlson Early Intervention here in Grand Forks, and I do home visits.
Another fabulous partner of ours, the Ann Carlson Center.
Sarah.
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yes, hi everybody. I'm Sarah Myers. I am a nurse from Childcare Aware here.
And that's the rock star Sarah that I was talking about. You're going to get to meet her and hear from her and learn from her a little bit later.
Thank you.
How about Madison?
Hi, yes, Madison Schmitz. I'm a nurse with Grand Forks Public Health.
Wonderful.
And Shanae?
Hi, I'm Shanae. I'm a nurse, public health nurse for Kittson County. I'm also the school nurse for Hallock Schools, and I am also a home visitor.
Great. And Charlotte, did you want to introduce yourself? All right.
She might have mic issues, so.
Yeah. All right. That's our list. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. We will take some breaks throughout the day here, and Tina will help with guiding that and kind of watching the time and that kind of thing. We're going to go on to the next section where we're going to talk about kind of an introduction to child injury. I'm going to shut my camera off just because I'm looking at 2 different screens as I present, like what slide am I on and what's coming up next. And I don't want you to think I'm distracted looking 2 different directions. So I'm going to shut my camera off. All right, so childhood unintentional injuries. Let's jump into this. I'm a nurse by background, and so I know that we need to know and understand the mechanisms of injury. I also spent many years as an intensive care nursery and pediatric nurse, and I will say one of the first things you got to learn in that arena is that children are not little adults. Their bodies respond and act very differently than adults do. And it's important that people know and understand that in an effort to take, things, for example, adult may be able to tolerate hotter water temperatures. Their skin is thicker and more calloused and that kind of thing. Children's skin is much more sensitive and a lot thinner barrier for their body, and so water temperature needs to be reduced. So you might have an adult in a hot tub and the jacuzzi's just fine for them. You put a child in the same environment and it's not so much. So they're not just little adults, and I want to start with that caveat. Go ahead and next slide. So what is an injury? An injury is occurs when the body is exposed to energy that's greater than its ability to absorb it. So if all of a sudden you slam your head onto the cement when you fall off your bike, the injury occurs because the head, the skin, the brain was not able to absorb the amount of energy that it took. There are different types of energy, and we're going to go into all 4 of those so we can learn how each of them act on the body, and then also ways in which we can try to mitigate that injury from occurring. Next slide. The first one is mechanical. We oftentimes in our science classes have heard this referred to as kinetic energy, or the energy associated with motion. This is the one that is most often associated with injury. You're in a car crash and you're not wearing your seatbelt and you fly through the windshield. You're on your bike, you hit a bump in the road and you fly off your bike. A child is at the top of the steps, there's not a baby gate, and they start falling down those steps. It's that energy of motion. You'll see on there, it's got, like I said, it's oftentimes referred to as kinetic energy or mechanical energy. Next slide. Thermal energy. We all get this one when we see the flames at the bottom. It's associated with temperature. Things like burns or heat from, it could be from flames, it could be from a hot surface. It could be from a child being left in a car and the temperature in that environment rising to levels that their body cannot withstand. We're not going to talk about heat stroke in vehicles today, but I will tell you when we do talk about that topic, one of the things we say is that children's bodies overheat 3 to 5 times faster than that of an adult. So if, for example, on a hot summer day, we were to shut our car off, turn that air conditioner off, and within 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, an adult was overly hot to the point that they needed to open the doors and get out or turn the car back on to, get some cool air. If it took 5 to 6 minutes for an adult, that child probably hit that barrier or that breaking point at about 2 to 3 minutes because of how fast their body temperatures overheat. So thermal energy is certainly something that we need to be cognizant of. Next slide. Electrical energy. This is anything associated with electricity. We're going to talk about this today with overloading circuits, frayed cords, electrical shock that can occur that can actually stop the heart, or electrical energy that can cause burns. So that is another type of energy that we need to think about. And next slide. Chemical energy. Chemical energy comes from chemical substance, and you'll see on here, go back to your science classes again, solid, liquids, and gases. Those are the forms in which chemicals can exist. And you'll find chemicals in things like medicines, metals such as lead, lead poisoning, household cleaners. And we know that most chemical injuries occur when somebody ingests a chemical substance. I see somebody said, is anyone else having issues with the slides? Mine keep freezing. You may want to make sure your camera is shut off and you're only watching the slides. Is anybody else having trouble with it? A lot of times it's because of your Wi-Fi being unstable. Anybody else having trouble? Can you give me the thumbs up if you're doing okay? All right, it sounds like everybody else, I'm getting thumbs up, is doing okay. You might want to check your Wi-Fi access and make sure your camera's off, because that will take up a little less energy. All right, next slide. Just as a matter of being, we will send out all of the slides. If the person that is having trouble with it, if you'd like us to email you a PDF of the slides right now, we can certainly send that out to you. Just message that to Tina in the chat box. All right, so if you go back one slide, It talks about the hazards of energy. So any of those energies that we talked about, the mechanical, the thermal, the electrical, or the chemical, any one of them can be a hazard. And we think of a hazard as that potential for injury. Next slide. So the severity of that injury is going to depend on 3 factors. Number 1 is the amount of energy. Was it a low volt shock that they got or a high volt shock that they got? Was the car traveling 20 miles an hour or was it traveling 70 miles an hour? What is the amount of energy? The other indicator is how is that energy distributed? For example, the example here is, are they getting 1 aspirin, which is a chemical exposure, versus 30 of them? We in the child passenger safety arena talk about the car seat having a 5-point harness. In a car seat, it touches at the 2 shoulders, the 2 hip bones, and at the pubic bone. That 5-point restraint is going to spread the force of the crash out over 5 hard places in a crash, as opposed to a seatbelt, which is a 3-point restraint. It touches at the shoulders and at the 2 hips. If we're in a crash, a young child and I traveling at the same speeds, I only have the crash forces spread out over 3 parts versus a child that has it spread out over 5 parts. The energy is going to be different because of how it's being distributed. And then, of course, the third factor is what body part is affected. Anybody knows that if you go into CPR or a situation where you're in cardiac arrest, the body shuts down the blood supply to the parts of the body that are less important, our hands, our legs, our feet, and it tries to preserve that blood flow to the brain, the heart, the lungs, those important things. We know that, as it says on here, if a baseball hits a thigh, probably less of an injury than if it hits the eye. So those are the 3 factors that help to determine the injury severity. Next slide. I told you that children are at greater susceptibility to injury because their bodies are made very differently. Go to the next slide and we'll talk about some of those differences. Number 1, they're small in size. If a pot of water falls on a child as opposed to an adult, they have less surface area. So that same pot of water is going to cover a lot of the body because of their smaller size. We also know that that smaller size can allow them to get into places and spaces that are maybe not intended for them and where an adult would not be able to access. We know that children have different levels of development. They have different experiences and different behavior. A young child may crawl out to the edge of a pool and they look at the surface of that pool, not realizing that it's water. It doesn't hold people afloat, that there's a bottom, but it's 4, 5, 6, 8 feet below them, and that they can't just keep walking off the edge of that deck of the pool and into the water. They don't have that life experience. They also have very impulsive behaviors and things like that that impact their decisions. They have a lack of experience. They don't know that that red glowing thing on top of the stove surface is a hot surface. They haven't been burned yet, or they haven't touched something hot. They don't have the same experience that adults do. They also have a slower response time. So they may touch that burner, but their response time is slower for that signal to go from their hand to their brain to cause that reaction to pull that hand back. Children also have an increased metabolic rate. So if they ingest a pill where it has a slower response in an adult, their metabolic rate is so fast and so high that that drug or whatever that chemical is that they have consumed is taken up very, very rapidly in the body, and it gets into their system very quickly. So as it says on the bottom and kind of sums this up, in all of these areas, children are still learning and growing and trying to figure out their environments. And so they are at a greater risk than adults are. Next slide. let's think about kids by age category a little bit. First off, children 4 and under, they really don't have an ability to recognize and understand danger. To them, the world is a playground and anything that is in it is fair game. I have a grandson that'll turn 5 months in a couple weeks, and everything he sees, he's now reaching for and grabbing. My daughter is a doctor, and I took him up to visit her the other day. And I think of the hospital being a big petri dish right now with cold and RSV and COVID and flu and all the things that are in there. And the first thing he did when she set him down to breastfeed is grab her name tag and wanted to put it into the mouth. They don't understand that. They're learning about their environment by putting things in their mouth, by grabbing, by touching, by feeling. Their world is very different, and they don't have that ability to understand that that name tag is dirty. It might have germs on it, and it's not something that goes into the mouth. They're still developing coordination. You think of little children who start to walk, they're very head heavy, top heavy. They don't maybe have the ability to navigate those steps in the same way that an older child does. The other thing about them is they tend to imitate adults. So sometimes you may not even say anything to a child. They are watching everything that you do. And if you do it, it's good enough for them to do it. So that alcoholic drink that's sitting on the table at Christmas time, if you're drinking from it, they know that their beverage comes in a cup. They pick it up and they drink it too. They imitate a lot of adult behaviors. And then they have a limited ability to react promptly and properly. Next slide. Think about those kids that are age 5 to 19. They are increasingly taking on adult tasks. We may ask them to mow the lawn, or we may ask them to wash the dishes, or something like that, load the dishwasher. There might be knives involved. We're asking them to do things that are adult tasks, but do we teach them how to do it, or do we just assume that they know? They also have an increase in their interest and intrigue with dangers. Oftentimes you'll hear firefighters talk about the fact that teens that light fires, oftentimes were just playing with fire because they were intrigued by it. And that intrigue with danger, to take risks, is very much a part of this age group. They also have a tendency to dare each other. How many of you have heard about the cinnamon challenge, or the Tide Pod challenge, or the cold bath challenge? Some of those things. Dare, is a part of their language and their vernacular in this age group. Also think of this as a time where they have more free time with without adult supervision. They're maybe coming home alone after school. Think about the clients that you serve, and is mom maybe working till 5 o'clock, but the kids come home alone after school. They can't afford childcare. They don't want to pay for childcare for that short period of time. Think about that unsupervised time. I will say that we do offer 2 classes. One is a babysitting class, and one is called Safe at Home Alone. That is a class that we encourage kids who are coming home alone after school to take. You on our website can find a book. It's called Safe at Home Alone. It is a great resource that will probably showcase. It's hard with 388 slides to remember which ones are in the presentation or not, but maybe Tina, she's being really quick here, could put a link to that resource in the chat box as well. You can download that from our website as well, but that's a great tool to use for children of this age. Next slide. Think about children being small, and again, that greater surface area and their ability to fit into places that maybe as an adult we couldn't. A refrigerator, a toy chest. Their vantage point is very different. When you and I walk into a room, we look at the pictures on the wall or the things on the surface of the table. When a little kid walks into the room, they're probably noticing the clutter underneath the desk, or something that's spilled on the floor underneath the table, or a pill that's dropped on the floor in the bathroom. So very different vantage point. Next slide. This slide is one that we see a lot in our nursing program. as we talk about child development. If you look at this slide, it's intended to show you that children's body stature is built very different than adults is. They have very large, disproportionately large heads, and those heads, they come with a very fragile head, neck, and spine. They don't have, you know, when you get that newborn baby, you're holding them, their head, because they don't have that neck strength to hold that very heavy head up. If you look at that young child, that baby, their head is about 25% of their body weight. And so if they get a burn to that, or they go outside and their head's not covered and it's exposed to cold, it's going to cool off that body a lot quicker than it would for an adult. As they start to grow into that toddler age, that heavy head is reason why you can have children that can drown in a bucket of water on a driveway or in a toilet. Maybe mom is taking a shower. Kids are intrigued by the cold water and the splash of the toilet. They reach in to play in that splash in that water. All of a sudden, that heavy head is now down in the toilet, and they don't have enough upper body strength to bring their body into an upright position. And so they get themselves into precarious situations because of where their center of gravity is and their disproportionately large heads that they have. Next slide. I won't read through all of these, but it basically talks about children's inability to absorb the energy and to handle the severity of that injury from those different causes of injuries that we talked about. Next slide. Here's a couple other changes that we talk about when we're talking about child development. Their biological systems, I talked about the skin being very thin, their internal organs being very immature, and their skull is very soft. So a hit to the head in a small child is going to be more consequential than it would be to an adult. We know that they have less protective barriers and defense mechanisms than adults, and they're more susceptible to injuries when they do occur. Next slide. These are a couple other things that we should mention. Their motor skills take time to develop. Most newborn actions that they have, they're not the child intentionally moving their hand or their leg away from something. It's more of a reflex that is in a newborn meant to help protect them, but certainly they are very, very reliant on that adult to keep them from dangers that might be inherent in that crib or that car seat. We know, for example, that infants can suffocate easily because of their inability to move their head, to lift their head off of that surface. Toddlers, I talked about that drowning in toilets because of their inability to push themselves out. And then children becoming locked in places because they can't figure out a lock. We talk about heat stroke and children becoming trapped in cars. And while this is oftentimes a young child incident where they're left in a car seat in the back, we have also seen children up to as old as age 11 who have died of heat stroke in a car, who have developmental delays or a low intellectual level where they don't realize the child lock may be on their side of the car, but not realizing that if they would have just gone to a different door in the vehicle, that they would have been able to open up that door. And so their ability to get locked into trunks or dryers or a toy chest or refrigerators set out on the berm or things like that is something that we certainly need to consider. Next slide. Again, kids' inability to recognize hazards, and we talked about some of those already, so I won't reiterate those, but you'll see them listed. Next slide. Their increased attraction to potential hazards. Look at that pile of pills. How interesting does that look? When we do medication safety today, we're going to talk about candy and pills and how much they look alike, and how confusing, particularly poisonous things can be, and how we as society make that even harder by making some products that look very much similar to food products. Next slide. Adult modeling. Our adults, when you drop your kids off at school and you tell the kids to go to the crosswalk, that's great. But then do they watch you walk back to the car across the street in the middle of the street? Are they seeing you put your seatbelt on, right? They learn so much by watching what happens in the environment, whether that be a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a coach, or what they see on television. I hate Mountain Dew. I don't drink it. It's a sweet pop. I've never had a love for Mountain Dew, but it's one of my favorite soft drinks because several years ago, they started an advertisement where they were advertising Mountain Dew, and they had people out rollerblading, and they all had helmets and elbow and knee pads on. And I was so excited by it because I thought Mountain Dew is oftentimes a drink of teenagers, and what a great way. They're advertising Mountain Dew, but that message was also about safety and good choices. And so think about the places where they may see things that there's not words or there's not messages that are verbal, but they are messages that say things to kids. Next one. Lack of experience. I don't think I need to go into that one anymore, but they just haven't had the same amount of experiences that adults have. Next slide. Lack of fear, right? Oh, I can do that, or oh, my friend did it the other day, or whatever. Kids see things on video games. They're challenged by friends. They have no fear. And that is something that we need to make sure that we create an environment for them that is safe to live and to work and to play in, so that we get rid of as many of those dangers there because of kids' lack of fear. Next slide. Kids' natural desire to explore. They're curious. They're intrigued by noises, by sounds, by colors, by moving things. A flame that flickers, it's bright. I mean, how cool is that, right? Think of all the things that are in our environment. By that TV that they want to see, they're climbing up to that television. So many things that brings intrigue and their desire to explore. Next slide. We talked about kids putting things in their mouths. This poses so many risks to kids, from choking to poisoning to electrical shock, grabbing that electrical cord and chewing on that, to thermal burns. There are so many things that come from kids' just natural development of putting things in their mouth. That's how they learn about their environment. And we're going to talk about many of those things that they get into their mouth throughout the day. Next one. All right, injury prevention. We talk about injury prevention strategies as interventions, things that we can do to try to mitigate or prevent those injuries from occurring. We can put those interventions in place in a lot of different ways. We're going to talk about those here. Go to the next slide, Tina. Primary prevention is all about preventing the injury from occurring. I don't even want that kid to get hurt. So what can we do? We can get rid of small parts around children's toys. We can lock up poisons. We can put button batteries out of the way of kids. That would be a primary intervention, getting rid of the hazard so that the injury never occurs. Next slide. Secondary prevention is reducing the severity of it. So we know that kids, if they're learning how to ride a bike, are probably going to fall off. They're probably going to hit their head. But what can we do to try to reduce the severity of that injury? Let's put a helmet on them, right? There might be a fire in the house, but you know what? If we have all of our sleepwear be fire retardant, that's a way that we can try to reduce the severity. So those are just a couple examples of a secondary prevention strategy. Next slide. Our tertiary prevention, that is improving our outcomes once that injury occurs. So for example, If I have a child that is driving a car, a teen, and they are in a car crash, and that car crash happens on Columbia Road, and it's 3 blocks away from Altru. It's in the middle of broad daylight on a street where there's heavy traffic, and somebody sees that crash. They call 911. The emergency responders come right away. They get that teenager out of the car. They put him in an ambulance. They're trained in how to do immobilization of the head, neck, and spine. They've got all the equipment that's needed and required. And within a few minutes, that teen is in an ER where there's trauma providers, there's surgery, there's specialists. The chances of survivability in that crash, maybe it's a T-bone crash, are going to be significantly higher than a teen that's out driving in the middle of the country on a gravel road that crashes in a car, no other traffic around, in the middle of an environment where there are not people who maybe find them right away. There's volunteer ambulance people who need to get up and out of bed, get to the ambulance department, get in that rig, get them loaded up. Maybe they're trained in the same manner, maybe not, but their care center is further away. Very different outcomes based on how can we prepare and ready our emergency personnel and our public to respond to these crises. I will say, if you are anybody that's involved with ambulance transport, I'm going to have you put on your little resource sheet. I am trained as a car seat technician that also does training. I've been a transport nurse for many years, and I do training for ambulance departments in how to transport children in ambulances. If that is a training you're interested in, write that on your sheet. I will let you know we're going to be scheduling those sessions coming up after the first of the year, and we'll get you on our list to receive that mailing once it comes. So that is kind of a summary of injury, how they occur, how we need to think of them, and how we can go about putting strategies in place to try to prevent the injuries from occurring, or how to respond to them should they occur. With that, are there any questions either in the chat box or anybody that wants to come off of mute? And we'll take those questions before we move on to the next session. Tina, if you want to go ahead and queue up the slides for the next presentation, you can, but we'll pause there for a minute to take any questions.
Norma, you're muted.
Sorry, if there's no questions with that, we will jump into, is Vanessa with us? Has she joined on the call? There she is. I see her. Perfect. So Vanessa is with Find Safe, and she works out of the Minot area. We're going to turn the presentation over to her. I will let her do more of an introduction of herself and of the program and the resources that she has to share within the state, somewhat in a limited area, but make you aware of some resources that are available. So thank you for joining us, Vanessa, and we'll turn this over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Karma, so much for having me. We're excited to be back, and we are so excited that we did get another round of funding for this project. So the Find Safe project was originally funded 4 years ago. It's a 3-year grant through the Department of Justice. And so the first initial grant was all about wandering prevention in the state of North Dakota as a general basis. We just wanted to get a good platform for the program here in the state. So we work with a program called Project Lifesaver. It went really well. We had a lot of individuals enrolled in the program. We had really great feedback. However, we were unable to find outside funding to continue the program. And so the grant did end. We had a kind of just a little bit of a pause. But from there, we were able to fund this project, Find Safe 2. I was really original with the title. So my name is Vanessa. I work with the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities through Minot State University. I work on a bunch of different grants, but this one is definitely one that's very near and dear to my heart. As we know right now, there's an individual missing out in the state, which I hope he is able to be found and located. But in regards to children, just hearing what Karma said, kids get into a lot of different things, but specifically kids with disabilities may not have the tools to be able to know their surroundings as well, or other pieces. And so there may be extra tools and support that families might need. Specifically, children with autism is one that we found is a huge gap in regards to wandering prevention. So we hear of those horror stories of kids wandering, things like that, getting into situations, going near bodies of water, things like that. That's what this grant is all about. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth because this future grant is for reservation communities specifically, but prior we did have this project, and I'm always willing to have conversation about either one because it's just wandering prevention as a whole is what I want to kind of address for this morning, especially with those young kids. So we work really closely with the Highway Patrol and other outside resources, the Alzheimer's Association, Autism Society. We really want to make sure that families are aware of this program. There's always a feeling of huge cost when it comes to it. So we just want families to know that there are grants and resources out there. So we have a 3-year grant in order to work with tribal law enforcement, North Dakota law enforcement, and first responders on reservation communities. We can go next slide. So I ran through a little bit. So if you're not familiar with the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities, we're always doing grant work and projects like this. We're located at Minot State. Obviously, I work from home, but we have all of us are kind of all over the state. We have various projects, but we have 4 functional areas that drive our work, and that's community services and training. We do the research part of it, pre-service, and then information dissemination. And those are 4 really big key areas, especially around people with disabilities, that we want to keep the conversation going. And we can do it statewide. So that's the best part about this. No matter where you're located at, if there's a project that you're thinking of or something that you want to write, we write all the time. And so we have a whole really great team. We have the backing of Minot State. We do a lot of really great work here in the state in regards to that. So next slide, please. All right, so our Find Safe goal is to collaborate and support law enforcement in their efforts to reduce and prevent injuries and deaths of missing individuals on reservation communities with dementia or developmental disabilities in the state of North Dakota. So I'm not sure if any of you all work with any families specifically on reservation communities. If so, I would really love to chat with you. We just got funded this fall, so we're very new in this project in the stages where it's at, but we know that wandering prevention happens anywhere. And so we really want to make sure that we're reaching out to key people that may need to know about this, that could share this with families. We don't want to overstep. We don't want to push anything. We just want people to know about this option of this program. So we can go next slide. Awesome. Okay, so I don't know how many of you guys know about Find Safe from prior. I think I did a presentation for Karma previous to this. It was all COVID, so it's all a blur now. But for Find Safe, what the program is so Project Lifesaver is the program that we are trained under. So Find Safe's the grant, Project Lifesaver is the program that we have. And so you have to be a law enforcement in order to get trained in it. I run the program on the side with all the consumers and getting all their IDs and the funding of it and pieces like that. But the bracelet that you see there, that's what the individual can wear. So we've modified it slightly because with children especially, things they don't want, especially with children with disabilities as well, there's a lot of sensory issues. So we've had it sewed into pieces of their clothing. It's not always ideal, but we can make exceptions like that. But when it comes to wandering prevention, even just starting that or trying that, having it tied to their shoelace on their shoe, things like that, we really try to be as creative as possible, because a lot of times wearing it on the bracelet or on the wrist is not comfortable. It is pretty big. They are working at getting it to be a smaller size, smaller ones, but obviously with the battery that they have in there and everything else, there's only so small that they can get at this point anyway that I've heard of. But what it is it's a tracking device. So if the individual wanders, the family, or as soon as they notice that the child is missing or adult in some situations, they would call 911. Our local office or whoever is trained at that point would immediately go out to the last known location of the individual, and they would take that receiver that's in the bottom part of the picture there, and they would track the individual. As long as that battery is working on that bracelet, they can track up to, I believe it's 2 miles. So if they can get a good start on finding that individual, we can prevent deaths. We assisted during the previous grant, we assisted 2 people with wandering prevention that wandered and that we had to go out and find them. One was a guy, he actually wandered twice from it was a young adult actually, a teenager he wanted to go out. He was independent enough. He lived in an assisted living home, but once he left, he did not know his surroundings or anything like that. And they actually found him on a really cold day. So in order to do that, that was an amazing rescue. And it happened, and I think the time was like 12 minutes or something like that from the point of the phone call to the point that we found him. So this can make a huge difference in people's lives. Obviously, for this purpose of this grant, it's only reservation communities. However, like I said, we still want to continue that conversation because wandering prevention, I don't think is talked about enough, especially with young children, those with disabilities. Families don't feel like they have a lot of backing or resources at their fingertips, or what their options are. So the more conversation we can keep about this, I think the better long term for us. So that bracelet is only worn, it can be worn in the bathtub. It is water resistant. It's not waterproof, so we definitely advise families to be aware of that. But we just want people to know about what they have available with that. We can go next slide.
I just want to say one thing, Vanessa. We're going to talk a little while later about water safety, and I will tell you that children who die with autism, it usually occurs from drowning. They're very attracted to water. And, I just cannot say enough how this has been helpful. We've referred some clients and again, this is reservation based now, but we bring Vanessa on, even if you're not near a reservation, to know that technology and stuff like this exists. And Vanessa is going to be your point of contact to figure out, is there other funding or something that we can do to help with this? Because very, very valuable tool.
It is. And I hope that, I know it'll have to come down probably to maybe legislation or something along those lines. But if you know of programs that have any funding or want to collaborate or anything like that, I would love to visit with them. I know North Dakota Assistive is doing amazing things out in the state. So that's in the interim, we really referred people to them. And not kid related, they have a senior safety program, but I would love families to know more about this. I would love to keep that conversation going because like Karma said, water is the number one. Actually, the first grant, we had our training in the fall. It was actually in the fall of 2020, I believe. And while we were there, West Fargo Police Department does this independently. They have funding from a local business, and so they're able to keep that program going. They have not quite infiltrated to Fargo, which if anyone knows anyone in Fargo law enforcement, please advise them to keep that conversation going with it because West Fargo is doing an amazing job with it. But on that first day, they actually saved a young boy from drowning the day that we had our training. So everyone was just very excited and it just got that enthusiasm up and just the reality of like, this program works. This program is international. It works for a lot of different counties and sheriffs and police departments, things like that. But we were the first ones in the country to do it as a statewide program, which given our size seemed appropriate and definitely was. We helped a lot of individuals during the entirety of that grant. So in regards to eligibility, they have to be diagnosed with a developmental disability or Alzheimer's dementia. They can live at home, an assisted living facility, or nursing home. We do work with assisted living facilities. We have worked with nursing homes as well to train staff. You do not, that individual, I just want to press this one. Individual does not need to have wandered in the past. They may just be showing those exit seeking behaviors. And that's really, really important for at least the family to call and get some more information and at least be aware of the program. They cannot drive a motor vehicle, which hopefully won't apply to young children, those teenagers, you know, maybe. But then, and for regards to this grant, they have to live on a reservation community. We are looking at that for the tribal communities, just being able to reach out to them. So next slide. All right, this is important. So for sure, Project Lifesaver is very good. But when I'm meeting with families, it's not always going to be the best fit all the time. So we want to make sure that we're using a lot of other assistive technology or a lot of other preventative methods as well. We encourage families to reach out to a ND Assistive because there's a lot of locks they can put on their doors. But we want to be as proactive and not so reactive as possible. But I think just having that conversation with each family, especially each family is so individual with what needs that child or adult may have. So I just want to know we don't slap a bracelet on everybody that comes across our phone, every phone call that I get or things like that. We definitely talk through the situation and see what's a best fit for that family. But again, we are encouraging collaboration amongst all of these different resources. So Autism Society of North Dakota, the Alzheimer's Association of North Dakota / Minnesota, and North Dakota Assistive. We really, really push those because there's a lot of good technology out there that isn't just an Apple Watch. That's one thing that families, I think, go to, especially for young kids. Apple Watches are very expensive still, and there's other things that can go wrong. We live in North Dakota where the weather is I mean, we've been lucky so far, so I'm going to knock on wood, but it can get very, very, very cold. Those things will turn off. I know that technology is advancing and there's different things, but that battery will work. We've found individuals in, because I'm Canadian, so -20 Celsius, so whatever that is in Fahrenheit. So there's a lot of different ways that we can help support that individual, but we want to collaborate and continue that collaboration. All right, next slide, please. All right, so if you're wondering about cost, so we were just talking about the Apple Watch bracelet kits, and that's a whole kit for 1 year. That's including the band, bracelets, the batteries, the lubricant to keep it water resistant, and as well as the battery tester. That's about $325 after the first year. So after that initial piece, it's $20 per year. So I put in there the senior safety program can potentially help with that. But in regards to children, those are and then in regards to that, the bracelet kits, it's very cost effective. Plus there's a lot of grants that can potentially help with those. So if you know of families or you think cost is going to be an issue, that's a good conversation to have with me. We want to keep those going. So next slide. All right, so again, there's my contact information. So I think Karma said that the slides are going to be shared with everybody. I work at Minot State through the North Dakota Center for Persons with Disabilities, so NDCPD. Please, or reach out to Karma. She has all my information. I would love to chat with anybody. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions about the program, or if you have contacts, since we're so new in the grant, if you have more contacts with any of the health clinics within tribal communities, any kind of contact like that, we would love to have those conversations. We're making slow progress. We do have a cultural liaison on our grant this go around, and he actually lives in Turtle Mountain, and I work with him on another project. And so it's been a really great collaboration. I want to make sure that the right people are getting the right information, and we can slowly let people know about this program, and that people don't have to wander. There's preventative ways that we can work together on it. So.
Well, thank you so much, Vanessa, for joining us today. We kind of snuck her in before we start talking about all of the rest of the things, because we've heard this presentation before and know that there are some resources. As always, they're sometimes limited, but I do want you to have Vanessa Rovig's contact information, because she may be a good person to reach out to if you're thinking of a client that you work with that this may be helpful for. So with that, thank you, Vanessa, for joining us. I think we will take a little break here. So probably back like at 10:30. Does that work for everybody? We'll just hold on these slides and we'll be back at 10:30. So get up, stretch, get yourself something to drink, another cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, whatever. If you've got questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll be back.
So we'll start calling people back. It is 10:30. All right, our break time should be over. So Karma, I think that we'll be hearing from you next. Is that right?
That is correct. And thank you everybody for coming back from the break. I will get going. We're going to talk about fire safety, and we got a lot of slides on this topic. So go ahead, Tina, and advance to the next one. So this just shows the number of incidents that occur every year as it relates to residential fires. When you look at that number of 370,000 residential fires every year, that's a lot. That's one every 82 seconds of the day. I think of how scary fires are, and I think of the number of ways that we sometimes put our home or our property in danger because of things that we do that could cause a fire. And so we're going to talk a little bit about fire prevention today. Fires and burns are the 5th leading cause of unintentional injuries among kids under age 14. Most fires occur in the home at night when people are asleep. And I want you to think about that, because I know that child care centers and schools are required to do fire drills routinely to practice. And yet look at this slide where it talks about most fires occur in the home and at night while people are sleeping. It is critical that we have alarms, that we have our doors closed, that we do fire drills and practice in the middle of the night. I get that, if you've got sleeping toddlers or kids and it's a weekend, the last thing you want to do is wake them up in the middle of the night. But I'm going to encourage you to do fire drills in the middle of the night and see if those kids do wake up. And we're going to come back to more about that. But it speaks to this whole thing of most fires occurring in the home when people are asleep at night. And then half of the fires occur between 11 and 7. That's that nighttime. Most, and in North Dakota, I get the fire injury data in our state from our state fire marshal. And in North Dakota, over half of the fires in our state are started from unattended cooking. So we'll talk more about that as well. So again, it's not just about come to us to get a fire alarm, but it is about providing the additional education that needs to go along with this topic. Next slide. The majority of homes and fires are preventable. There are things that we do in our houses that are really, really stupid that cause a lot of those fires to occur. And so, number one, the fires are preventable, but then also, do we have things in place that will alert us to a fire should they occur so that we can, again, save ourselves and get out of that environment? Most often, people do not die just of the flames, but they die of the smoke. 30% of the time they die from the flames. The rest of the time it's occurring from the smoke that is happening. And people can very easily become overcome by that smoke, particularly a young child, and particularly people that are sleeping. And so you'll see on here, the majority of people die from inhaling smoke and toxic gases. Our homes are filled with lots and lots and lots of things that are more plasticky, that are not like in the old days, a lot of furniture was oak. The majority of it was, or oak flooring. We've got carpet. We've got a lot of man-made materials that cause a lot of very, very black smoke when they burn. And so those gases and fumes that people are inhaling are oftentimes the reason that they succumb to fire damage or fire injury. Next slide. It probably comes as no surprise that smoking is one of the leading causes of fire deaths and injuries. Many times people fall asleep. They make the habit of sleeping in or smoking in bed, which is very, very dangerous because they fall asleep, or smoking while they're intoxicated, maybe sitting in a recliner or on a couch or things like that. So anytime there are smokers in the home, we need to talk about having hard and fast rules about never smoking in the bed. If you are in a home and you see an ashtray on a bedside stand, have that conversation with people about that. Again, medication, impaired people don't just think of it just as alcohol, but people on pain medications or recreational medications that they may be using. Think about that as well, because again, those people using those substances are oftentimes making poor decisions when it comes to using the substance and smoking as well. Next slide. So obviously we know to keep kids away from cigarettes, cigars, other smoking products. One of the things that I would say, and we'll talk about this as it relates to poisoning, are electronic cigarettes. Well, they don't pose, they do pose a small fire hazard. Their biggest hazard with electronic cigarettes is the fact that they are packed with nicotine in those liquid syrups that come with them, and they are a poisoning danger. We'll talk more about that when we come to the poisoning section of our presentation today. But again, some of those rules: smoke outside, never smoke in bed. We do know that the incidence of SIDS increases significantly in homes where the parent or caregiver is a smoker and there is a smoke environment. So it's not just about the fire hazard, but that smoking also contributes to an increase in the number of SIDS cases. Next slide. We have seen people who do smoke outside. We had a house fire here that occurred in town one year from improperly extinguished cigarettes. You know, outside, you think about fall, leaves blowing, grass, wind, that kind of stuff. Make sure that you are extinguishing those cigarette butts in sand or in some kind of a water liquid or that kind of thing. And then again, make sure that there are not ashtrays out and about where they could be smoldering on a table near flammable things like magazines or newspapers, couch cushions, and that type of thing. Next slide. We talked about teens and their curiosity and their sense of daring each other or taking risks. And we know that a lot of fires set by teens come from their intrigue with matches or lighters. There are a lot of lighters out in the industry that are designed to be attractive to teens. They look like a Matchbox car or an ice cream cone, when in fact they're a cigarette. They're oftentimes sold at convenience stores, and kids play with those and they're intrigued by it. And so teens are a particular group that parents need to be mindful of and what their behaviors are around fires. Next slide. There are such thing as child-resistant lighters. You'll see one here where you have to both spin the wheel and push the button. Those are obviously much safer to use than one where you just have a one action thing where maybe you just pull a switch and it lights. The fire starters that you use for like a fire pit, a lot of times you have to push a button on the top and pull the little trigger thing. And they do that because children don't have the manual dexterity in able to do both of those, or the cognitive ability to figure out that you need to do both of those. And so that is a safety mechanism that has been built into those, but it is important that those are the types of devices that parents are using within the homes. Next slide. Candles. Candles can create a beautiful ambiance within the home, but they can be very, very dangerous, particularly if left unattended. We are coming into the holiday season where, having candles or lights around garland is a nice gesture. I will say, one year I set up this beautiful display of old world Santas on my floor, and I put some green garland around it. It was artificial garland, and I sprinkled it with some lights. When I went to put that away, I found that the lights had actually burned holes in my carpet. I think of what could have happened in that incident. Now, the LED lights that we have for Christmas do burn cooler than the regular Christmas lights, but I want you to think about where those lights are being put or where candles are being put, and think about using flameless candles instead of ones with real flames, particularly if they're going to be like on a fireplace or on a tabletop where there's garland, or in a window where there's curtains or blinds. The one thing I do want to just mention about flameless candles, while we do advocate for the use of them, I do want to say that most or many of those are powered, particularly the tea lights, by button batteries. And we're going to talk more later today about button batteries, but I don't want to advocate for use of a product that would prevent fires and yet advocate for something that could pose a button battery danger to children. So I do want you to be mindful of that and think about that and where those are placed so that they are up and out of sight and out of reach of young children. Next slide. If people are burning candles, if you see them around the home, look at what their placement is. Are they by a window? Are they by curtains? Are they on an end of a counter where a child could easily pull them off? Are they in a bedroom where somebody might light a candle and fall asleep, or a pillow may fall on that? And then think about that as you're making that home inspection, and think about how they can maybe better place that. And rather than having candles around in case the power goes out, talk to them about maybe using flashlights instead, keeping that in a bedside drawer at the top of the steps, in a place where if their power goes out, they could easily access that, so they're using that instead of a candle. Next slide. Fireplaces and wood stoves. It is really, really, really important, not only from a fire hazard, but from a carbon monoxide danger perspective, that we are paying attention to where fireplaces are, and are they being maintained. Talk to the homeowners about, have you had anybody come in and check this recently to assure that it is properly vented, that there's not a creosote built up in that fireplace. Look at what's next to it. Do they have firewood right next to it, and paper that they're saving to use to light that fire? If a spark gets out of that fireplace area, it could easily spark that flammable stuff that is near it. So be watching and mindful of that as you're doing a home inspection and there are fireplaces in the home. Next slide. Make sure that the fireplace has metal screens or heat-tempered glass on them, so that that fire is not a direct exposure to young children. We talked about young children that are toddling around. They may pull themselves up against that. They may touch that flame or that glass. They may get near that area and not have any sense of respect for how hot that fire is burning, or the danger that could be posed if those doors are left open. We say to keep anything that is combustible, so that could be a storage basket, newspaper, a blanket, a wood, a pile of paper, at least 3 feet away. So kind of create that safe zone around the fireplace. And then again, I talked about having that chimney checked and cleaned at least once a year by a professional. Next one. Wood stoves. There are seals that come on them that have an indication that they have been tested in labs to make sure that they meet all of the safety standards as it relates to sealability of those doors, and the thickness of the glass, the heat tempered glass. Make sure that there is some kind of a seal on that, and that it isn't something it has been sold off the internet that is not a proper safety device in that home, or that man cave, or that the garage, or the shed, or whatever the case may be. Next slide. Cleaning out of these fireplaces, it is important that when you take those ashes out, keep in mind that oak, for example, is a very, very hard wood. It burns very hot, and it burns for a long time. And if you're burning oak in that fireplace, it may look like the wood is out, but pieces of that firewood could have fallen down into that ash and still be hot and burning. Prior to cleaning out that fireplace and getting rid of the ash, it would be important to move those ashes around and assure that there are not any lingering pieces of hot ash. And when you do empty out the fireplace and get rid of the soot and the ashes that's in there, to put it into a metal type receptacle, not a cardboard box or something like that, that then you take out to your garbage. Oftentimes garbages are stored alongside the house, where that could catch on fire. Wet it down following removal from the fireplace. Next slide. This slide is put here to show how hot gas fireplaces burn. Boiling water, it boils at 212 degrees. We bake a cake at 350 degrees. Our curling irons, flat irons, are about 400 degrees. Think of how hot those things are and how you keep those out of the hands and reach of young children. And then I want you to look at how hot a gas fireplace burns. It burns at about 500 degrees. We oftentimes see third-degree burns that occur to children where they touch that front of that gas fireplace. And if you look at the slide, it will show you that in less than 1 second, a third-degree burn can happen to a young child. We talked in the beginning about their slower response time. And so if they were to fall into or lean into or touch that glass and not be able to pull back quickly, they could have very, very significant burns from that. Next slide.
Karma, Chantel asked, is that also the case with electric fireplaces?
Electric fireplaces tend to not burn as hot because it's actually electrical current coming through there. I'm not exactly sure what the exact temperature is. I can look that up and find that for you, but I know that it is not as hot as a wood fireplace or a gas fireplace, but they still do pose some danger, yes, but not quite as hot. Next slide, the gas fireplaces. Here it talks about having a screen. We have an example of that in our office if anybody wanted to use that for any type of a display. Or you could also put up some type of a safety gate around that area. Keep the remote controls for those gas fireplaces out of kids' sight and reach. Don't leave it on the coffee table or the end table so that it's only the adult that can turn that gas fireplace on, so that it is not something that kids have access to getting to or touching. I know there are also a lot of these gas fireplaces that are being put up in places like restaurants or hotel lobbies, to create that sense of ambiance. Again, it talked to parents about the fact that they are in commercial places and they do need to watch the children in those areas as well, because a lot of times they do not have the screen on the front of them. Next slide. Space heaters. These darn things cause so many fires and in homes, and they oftentimes occur because people are using them to heat up an area of the home, and they forget them. They're unattended. They might be set to a certain temperature. When it reaches that temperature, they go off, but the people forget that they're actually still on. They leave the room. Particularly if you have pets that may be in that area, they can easily be tipped over. Again, put them in an area where if you do leave the room, you're going to see them and know to unplug them or shut them off. Never have it in a child's room where they would be alone in a room with that. We had a call a couple of years ago of a family who they had an unfinished second level or a lower level of a split level home, and they had a new baby that they wanted to sleep up in the bedroom next to them. They were going to move the older child downstairs, but because they had not completely refinished that basement, they found it to be very cold, and they wondered about putting a space heater down there and if that was safe. I would never, ever, ever advise a space heater to be put in a room with a child that is going to be unattended or in an area where people will be sleeping. Next slide. Oh, the other thing about these space heaters of any type, make sure again that they have the label on them that says that they have been safety tested, the UL sticker on them. It comes from an underwriter's laboratory. That's an independent testing laboratory that tests these for the safety of the device. Now, it doesn't mean you can just do whatever the heck you want with it. You certainly don't want it in an area where it could tip, pets could get to it, animals or kids could touch it. It's by a curtain or other flammable products, but it does bear a separate sense of safety that comes with that sticker on it. Keep that space heater 3 feet away from furniture, curtains, paper, anything flammable. And then really important that these devices be plugged directly into the wall outlet, never using a power strip or an extension cord. Next slide, Tina. Stoves, microwaves, and ovens. I told you that a good percentage of homes fires start in the kitchen, and it oftentimes comes from unattended cooking. Oftentimes, truth be told, this comes from busy parents who leave the room to go to attend to kids, or it comes from people who come home from the bar at night, decide that they want to have something to eat. They put something on the stove to cook, they go sit down, and they fall asleep and forget that they have things on the stove. Really important that grease be kept free and clear of stoves because grease obviously is highly flammable, and any flame or heat source near grease can easily catch it on fire. So when you're in the home, look at that stove. Is it kept clean? Is it kept free from things around it, such as wicker baskets, paper towels? Many of us have a paper towel dispenser in our home. It might sit out on the counter. I keep mine near my sink. I oftentimes use it by my stove, but I don't keep it by my stove. I keep it by my sink instead. So think about towels, aprons, dishcloths, napkin holders, anything that would be flammable, keeping that away from that stove or heating source in the house. Next slide. We want to make sure that we keep young children out of the kitchen when cooking. You know, people a lot of times ask me for a baby gate to block off their kitchen. I don't want a baby gate to block off the kitchen. I don't want the kids, if there's something hot in there that they're going to get into, you should not be leaving that kitchen unattended if there's something hot on the stove. We don't need to baby gate off kitchens. We need to put knives in a drawer and put a lock on that drawer. We need to, put an appliance lock on a fridge if that's something that they might get into. But we shouldn't be doing that to keep them away from the stoves. If you've got a gas stove, rather than putting knobs over top of it that are expensive, we tell people take the knob covers off and store them in a drawer next to the oven so that kids don't have that temptation to turn on the gas. That kind of thing. Most of those knobs can be removed from a stove, which then prevents kids from being able to access them. Keep kids out of the way when you're cooking. Create, if you need to, a zone around that. Put some tape on the floor or something that says this is an area where you're not allowed in the kitchen. Never leave that stuff cooking in the kitchen unattended. And think about not holding kids near a stove. If you've got a young baby that needs attention, putting them in an infant seat or laying them down in their crib or something like that if you have to attend to something that is on the stove. And then think about the clothes that you're wearing. Short sleeve rather than long sleeves. When you're in the kitchen. And again, just reminding parents of that is sometimes helpful because they don't think of those things. Next slide. Baby walkers. Sarah's probably going to talk about this later when we present. Baby walkers, while they're still sold, never recommended. The stationary ones where they can't move, activity stations are great for children's development and play, but anything with wheels on it as a play walker, not recommended. It allows kids to get from what you may think of as a safe space to the next thing you know, they've made their way into the kitchen, or they've made their way to the top of a stairwell, or they've made their way to a space heater, or to a fire, or to a whole host of other things. We never want a baby walker with wheels on it. If you see those in the homes of your families, rather than saying they have to throw away the whole walker, see if there's a way that the wheels can be removed so that they can use it as an activity station, but they're not using it as a way for children to have mobility in that home. Keep things that attract kids away from the stove. You know, if that's where they got their cookies yesterday, make sure that they're not associating that with the stove. Keep things that they might be looking for away. And then I talked to you about this, removing the stove knobs so that they are not on the front of the stove like that. Will help keep kids from being able to ignite those burners. Next slide. Microwaves, we talked about storing flammables away. Use a timer when you're cooking so you don't forget about something. Keep a fire extinguisher nearby. That being said, we do talk in our babysitting classes, we do tell kids that is not their job to use that fire extinguisher. We don't want them doing that. They need to get out of the home. We don't want kids fighting fires. For an adult, it's fine to have that fire extinguisher there, but know that there are different fire extinguishers based on the type of fire that there is. You never want to use a fire extinguisher on a grease fire. The foam or the stuff coming out of the extinguisher is going to blow out of there, creating a wind, adding oxygen to that fire, and can spread that fire. So a grease fire, you're going to extinguish by taking the air supply away from it. So you want to put a cover or a cookie sheet or something on top of that pan. If you've got a fire in your oven, you want to leave that oven closed and shut the gas source off, but keep the door closed so it's not getting oxygen. But that fire extinguisher, while you can have it there, you want to make sure that people know how to use it. And that they don't teach kids how to use it, and also that they monitor that extinguisher, because they do lose their charge. So when we give out the sheets to check the fire extinguisher, we also oftentimes will say, use this to check your extinguisher as well to make sure that it is properly charged. Keeping one by a fireplace would be a great idea, but again, not for kids to use. Next slide. This one talks about a grease fire, use the lid of the pan, a class B extinguisher, baking soda or salt. Do not use water, flour, sugar, or wet towels of any type. Next slide. How to extinguish an oven fire: turn the heat source off and leave the door closed. Whatever is in there will eventually burn up. You do not want to open that door because it will add air to that, and it will then cause you to accelerate that fire. So leave the door closed, shut your heat source off. Next one. How to extinguish a microwave fire. Same with that. Turn it off, unplug it, keep the door closed. The inside of the microwave is made in such a way that it should not, the bowl or whatever it's in may burn if you're using a plastic, which we would encourage you to use glass bowls in a microwave. But if something in the microwave catches on fire, again, keep that door closed. And the outside metal of the microwaves that they're made out of will help to contain that fire within that space, just keeping it closed and shutting off the heat source. Next one. Furnaces, again, reminding your clients if they own the home to make sure that they have their heating system checked every year, that they are changing those air filters on there, and keeping that furnace well maintained. If they are in a rental property, they may want to reach out to the owner of that property to assure whether or not they are doing that maintenance on those heating units. Next slide. Electrical systems. We know that many electrical or many fires are caused by electrical equipment that is improperly used. Warning signs of electrical failure or problems could be a burning odor, sparks, heat, breakers that continually flip off. If they're going off, there's a reason that that is happening. So talk to your clients about those as being cues of something that might be a potential for an electrical fire. And certainly unplug that, whatever the piece of equipment is, and make sure that they get it checked. Call their local fire department, have the piece of equipment checked, but certainly do not use it if they have any of those cues that you see on that slide. Next slide. A couple things, make sure that when people get new appliances, they read the instructions, they make sure their equipment is in good working order, and they are really careful of what type of lampshades they have. If you notice one on a home inspection that is tipped to the side or seems to be not straight upright, or the lamp is tippy, make sure that you find a way to secure that lamp or secure that shade or get a new one so that that shade does not start touching the light bulb that is in that. Next slide. This slide talks about something that's really important as it relates to, we talked about heaters and that type of thing. Any wall outlet normally has 2 sockets in it. You only want to have one heat producing appliance plugged into that at a time. So don't plug in 2 crock pots or a crock pot and an electric roaster or a heater and a crock pot or something like that, a pizza oven. One heat producing appliance at a time. And then make sure that anything that is a heat producing item is plugged directly into that socket and not with a power strip or an extension cord. This is kind of goes into some things about the correct wattage. I won't read through all of those, they'll be on the slides, but again, some important reminders as it relates to electrical systems. Halogen, next slide, halogen lights burn very hot, and you'll sometimes see them in homes where people are using them for ambiance in teenage rooms, that kind of thing. Make sure, again, that there are not flammable things by those lamps and that they are kept well away from anything that, when there's not somebody there to attend to them. Next one. We would recommend not using the halogen lamps, using something different instead, not having curtains nearby, not having pets that could tip them over, and then using a halogen bulb of 300 watts or less if you are going to use them. Next slide. Electrical cords. If you see power strips, huge fire hazard, particularly when there are lots and lots of things plugged into that. So caution people, look behind tables or couches or desks where you may have a tendency to have a lot of things plugged into that outlet, and think about advising your clients on minimizing the number of things, particularly if they're heat products that are plugged into power strips. Next slide. Remind your clients to be looking for cords that may be frayed or exposed cords that are running through there. Again, get those replaced, take them out of use, and keep them away from small kids, because those would be a fire hazard or an electrocution hazard. Next slide. I think I've talked about this ad nauseum, but only one appliance. Do not use the power strips for plugging in multiple things with a heat source, and keep these these devices away from kids where they may be tempted to chew on them, particularly young children, or put things into those sockets. Next slide. Again, a lot of things, making sure that you have outlets that are children can see, that are covered with electrical, the little plugs that you can put into them, and we'll talk more about them after a while. Next slide. This pertains more to combustibles, things that might be stored in the garage, fuel sources, making sure when you're doing your walkthrough of that home that you're looking at garages and making sure that nothing is stored near something that might cause a danger, a fire-related danger from having gasoline or propane or that kind of thing stored too close to things that could catch on fire. Next slide. Never store gasoline in a basement. A lot of times that's a source for where you have a lot of furnaces or that kind of thing. And really only if you do have gas stored in the home, store minimum amounts. We know that people like to use it for lawnmowers or generators or things like that, but really trying to minimize the amount of gas that is stored in a home environment. Next slide. Children's sleepwear. It should, sleepwear that is sold in stores should be flame resistant. Keep in mind, you want to have things that kids are sleeping in that will try to retard those flames. Certainly blankets are something that will burn, but the sleepwear that they're in, if they were walking out of a home in the event of a fire, having that flame retardant sleepwear is important. Next slide. Having smoke detectors in the home, testing them every month. We do have a testing tracking log on our website that we'll provide to you and show you here in just a minute. But it is important that you test those batteries every month. Smoke alarms either come with a battery. It's a long life battery where you change the entire smoke detector every 7 to 10 years, or they have batteries that you need to change at least annually. We used to say change it every time you change your clocks, change your alarms. We now say you can change it once a year, but just make sure that that is done. Next slide. There are a variety of smoke detectors that are available, and they have different things that cause them to be helpful. Ionized respond faster to open flames, whereas photoelectric respond better to smoke. I wouldn't say one is better than the other necessarily, but it is important that you do know what kind you have within the home. Next slide. Smoke alarms should be on every level of the home and in all sleeping areas. Make sure that you have the correct battery and that you change it and check it. Make sure that everyone can hear it. Make sure that you know how children respond to those alarms and that you know if they get up. If kids do not respond to that alarm, there are alarms that you can get that you can record your voice to. There are alarms that you can get for the hard of hearing where there's a vibrating pad that they lay on. You can get people for people that are blind that can help them as well. Practice those and see how kids respond to the alarms, and then make sure that they know what your fire escape plan is. It is critical that people are sleeping with their doors closed. I told you that most people are overcome by flame or by smoke and not the flames. And so having those doors closed will give them extra time to help them to wake up and respond to that fire by having that door closed. Make sure they know that if the fire alarms are going off, to go to that door, touch the doorknob. If that is hot, do not open the door. That door is going to provide them with their ability to stay away from the smoke. Instead, they should go to that window, open the curtains, turn on the lights if they're still functional, will oftentimes say, open the window, throw a pillow or a stuffed animal out the door. When fire departments come to the home, they will do a walk around first and see if they see anybody at that window calling for help before they try to enter the building. If they see a stuffed animal or a pillow or something out there, they will know that there is somebody in there that needs to be rescued from that space. Next slide. If you have homes on the second floor, you may want to have an escape ladder in the home. The idea is that if you have kids, you want to have the adult go down first so they can help guide the children and provide stability to that ladder. You want to know where your meeting place is outside and have everybody be able to articulate where that is. And then kids should also, and adults, have a plan in mind that if they try to open that window and it is frozen shut, what is their backup plan? How are they going to break that glass? What can they use in that room to break the glass should they not be able to get that window open? Next slide. Outside numbers on the house should be at least 4 inches high when you go to do a home inspection. See, is that home visible so that when people come to respond, they can see that the numbers on the home. Make sure that people know to call 911, get out of the home, call once they're out of the home, go to a neighbor's and never re-enter that home. The other thing I say to people is every so far in a community, there are fire hydrants. Keep in mind, the fire hydrant is right outside of my house. I take responsibility to keep that free and clear so that firemen can get to it. But all of my neighbors down the street are going to be using that same fire hydrant. So have your people, if the fire hydrant isn't directly near them, make sure that the fire hydrant that would be used for their home, that somebody is taking responsibility, and suggest to them that they take their turn to clear it away so that fire people can get to it in the event that it needs to be used. The next slide. The fire departments do teach kids about stop, drop, and roll. There are great videos out about that. The fire departments do a good job with it, but you can ask if there are people that have practiced that with their kids. If you go to the next slide, I'll have Tina flip through these and we'll show you some of the things that we have as it relates to resources related to fire safety, the cooking safety. We've got a fire escape activity book for children, the fireplace one. You'll see the smoke alarm safety sheet that we talked about. The next page has resources. We've got smoke alarms. We've got winter home safety resources. Now would be a great time to get that out. If you go to the next slide, you'll see this big activity book where it's a storybook. There's a fire escape dry erase board, grilling safety. These are some of the resources that we have. Tina, I'm going to ask if you don't mind if you walk through the burn safety slides with people. There are not a lot of them, and a lot of the materials are self-explanatory on those slides.
Of course.
If you don't mind, I've got something I've got to attend to here really quickly, and I know that you'll be able to cover the information that's on those slides. So I'm going to turn it over to Tina.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I popped into the chat a link to our safety information on the Safe Kids website. So any of the printed materials that you've seen on the screen so far and that you see throughout the presentation today, if you don't want to wait, if you've got an emergent issue and you need a copy of it, you can actually print it off of there at any time. So let's talk a little bit about burn injuries. So the majority of scald burns to children are among those 6 months to 2 years, usually by hot foods and liquids. Again, we're talking about individuals who have thinner skin, who have much slower reflex actions. And so that food that is spilled oftentimes it's coming out of the microwave, it's food that the adults are preparing. Children are getting, hands in there, they're grabbing things. So it's important to be aware of where children are during food preparation and make sure that it's cooled before it's given to them. We want to make sure that we keep hot foods and liquids, obviously, away from children. One of the things that I have seen in homes, even my own, unfortunately, I have older children, but even in my own, is appliance cords draping over the edge of counters. And if you've got an appliance like a toaster, not only is that a risk of them being struck by that appliance if they pull on that cord, but it's also obviously a hot appliance. And so touching them can cause burns. It's really important to keep those cords away from the counter edges. Same with our burners. We want to make sure that pot handles are turned inward and not toward the edge of the stove, but we also want to try to use the back burners if we can, knowing that they're further away from a child's reach, as well as not having hot elements toward the edge of the stove where a child might reach up and touch that hot element. And along the same lines, making sure that hot things aren't set on top of tablecloths or placemats, things that can be grabbed from below the edge of the counter and pulled on top of the child. So keeping all of those hot items near the center of uncovered tables, we want to keep it out of their reach. One thing, and I've seen it in commercials and things and quick silly videos, but the person holding the infant who is sleeping or maybe holding a child while they're feeding them and having their own food or their snack or something, and some of it drops on the child. The commercial that I'm thinking of, a little bit of dip drops on the top of the baby's head and the father licks it off, which grossed me out. But it also kind of highlights the risk that child has if you are consuming food or drink while you're holding that child, especially if they are hot foods. Obviously, that can be a risk to the child. So not holding a child while you're doing that. We really like to encourage families, if they're going to use a high chair, like if they want to keep their child in sight and let them be kind of involved in the activities in the kitchen while they're cooking, to strap them into a high chair. Make sure that high chair has seat belts. It's set on a firm surface that's not going to be tippy. If not, making sure that they are in a playpen. That way, the parent can, first of all, focus on the task of cooking and not abandon the hot stove, but also that child they know is safe. Same with microwaves. We don't recommend that small children, toddlers use microwaves. Unfortunately, because the outside of the microwave isn't hot, it's really hard to convey to a child that is a burn risk. So just keeping them away from that microwave is a really good idea. And Karma mentioned our babysitting course. We do talk to those teen potential babysitters, and we talk to new parents about not using the microwave to heat baby formula or really any baby food, knowing that microwaves will create hot spots in that food item or in that liquid, that if it's not really, really well mixed, there's going to be hot and cold spots, and those hot spots can potentially scorch or scald that child. Breast milk shouldn't be microwaved because it actually does do some damage to the structure of the breast milk. So there's other reasons why you shouldn't microwave breast milk besides the fact that it can be a burn risk. Tap water burns do occur frequently in the bathroom. It's really, really important to make sure that you have turned down your water heater temperature, making sure that you have temperature gauges for that water. Sometimes our faucets can actually have governors on the faucet itself to make sure that they don't go above a certain temperature. The real danger with bathtub burns is the fact that it will cover a large portion of the child's body. They are submersed then in that very, very hot water. So it's really, really important that we absolutely avoid those kinds of burns. Like I said, you want to go ahead and you can adjust the water heater temperature yourself if you're going in as a home visitor, we strongly recommend that it be set at 120 degrees or lower. Those anti-scald valves on the faucets themselves are a really good idea. And we always, always want to supervise children in bathrooms, not just for the heat of the temperature, but because children can drown in a very, very small amount of water. And having that supervision is very, very important. Unbreakable bath thermometers are a great idea. I actually have, if you're looking at me on screen, I have this adorable one. Oh, you can't really see it. It's a little ducky and it's got a temperature gauge underneath. So the ducky floats in the water and the thermometer is below him. Something that's unbreakable is obviously very, very important because it is going to be near those little hands, near hard surfaces where if it's dropped, we don't want it to shatter or break. We want to make sure that children aren't controlling the faucet themselves so that they're not accidentally turning the water temperature too high for themselves. And we want to, in that effort, turn them away from the faucet so they're just not tempted to play with them or to touch them. So having their toys on the opposite side of the bathtub away from those faucets would be a great idea. Our Safe Kids resources, like I said, you can print them at any time, but we do absolutely have the opportunity to send them to you. So if that's something that you're interested in, please note on your resource request sheet that that's what you would like to order from us. I think it's something that I don't know a lot of families necessarily think about bath temperature, but it is a huge, huge risk. Now, carbon monoxide is something that I think we start really thinking about and focusing on in the wintertime. It's when we hear of a lot of cases of carbon monoxide poisoning. It is an odorless, colorless, tasteless byproduct of burning fuel. We have an activity that we do with kids sometimes where we'll bring little vials that have cotton balls that have been scented with different food flavorings, almond and mint and vanilla. And we have one that has no scent on the cotton balls inside of it. And we want them to guess which one is the one that carbon monoxide smells like. It's really, really important to point out to children that you can't necessarily, you can't detect carbon monoxide just, due to color. It's not like smoke where you can see smoke or smell smoke. It is emitted from fireplaces, from gas and kerosene heaters, appliances, charcoal fires. These buildups can occur from improper ventilation. One of the big risks in the wintertime that we see is not only with our furnaces, but sometimes when we have our remote starts on our vehicles, we want to warm those vehicles up before we get in them in the morning. If your garage is enclosed, or if your garage especially is attached to your home, the exhaust from the car creates carbon monoxide, and that can leak then into the home, causing carbon monoxide poisoning. Same with, if you get out of, the house, go get into that car that's been warming up inside of the enclosed garage, that garage is then full of carbon monoxide. The really hard thing about carbon monoxide poisoning is that it creates some flu-like symptoms. So if you're having, headaches and weakness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, these are all symptoms that would lead you to want to go get back into bed, to go lay down and try to sleep off whatever illness you had. Unfortunately, those are cases where people have felt this way. They've not known that it's carbon monoxide poisoning. And we have fatalities because they have stayed in that environment where carbon monoxide is present. So like I said, please don't let or encourage your clients not to leave those vehicles running inside of a garage, inside of a carport. If they're doing home improvements, making sure that a qualified person is installing gas or fuel systems so that they are ensuring that proper ventilation, and have those systems checked out regularly. We don't want to use charcoal grills indoors. In the wintertime, we get the urge to go barbecue. We still need to drag that barbecue outside. It cannot be in the garage. We don't want to use our cooking appliances as sources of heat. And above all else, we need to have carbon monoxide detectors on every level of the home to monitor indoor levels of carbon monoxide. It is really, really important to encourage families and children that if they hear the carbon monoxide alarm go off, they need to immediately remove themselves to fresh air. They need to go outside. We don't want them to call 911 while they're in the home. They need to exit and then call 911, and everybody needs to exit. When I talk to teens, when we were talking about the Safe at Home Alone class or the babysitting class, I always let them know that they're not the ones with the training and the equipment. That's the firefighters. The firefighters can go in there and they can be safe while they investigate that issue. So we absolutely encourage that. And carbon monoxide detectors, just from my own experience, I moved into a new home. I thought that my smoke detectors were carbon monoxide detectors. We lived there for about 3 months and didn't realize that we did not have carbon monoxide detectors. I feel like that's very, very common, that a lot of families do not have them in their homes. Another risk source for carbon monoxide that we don't sometimes think about is when we're boating. And we have known of cases where people have been overcome because of the boat fumes creating carbon monoxide. And whether they've been below deck, if it's been a multi-deck boat, or whether they've been on the back platform, dragging their feet in the water as everybody plays, we have had cases of that. So carbon monoxide is not just a wintertime risk. It is absolutely 100% year-round risk. So we do have some fantastic resources with regard to carbon monoxide poisoning. So these are their order numbers if you want them. We also have some display items. We have that game, like I was explaining to you before. So if you were doing a fair or if you were doing a presentation of some sort, we absolutely can loan you those items and let you kind of explain that to the families. It's something that I think we don't think about until we hear of a terrible tragedy in our communities. So it's really, really important that we're able to talk to families about it. So are there any questions about burns, scalds, carbon monoxide, anything like that? All right, so our next section is going to be on fall injuries, and this is where I get the honor of turning it over to Sarah Myers. So I'm going to let her kind of get herself situated. Sarah, I'm going to be operating your slides just like I have been for Karma. So just let me know when they need to be changed.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tina. Thanks, everybody. As I've been introduced so kindly today, Sarah Myers from Child Care Aware. I'm very humbled by everybody's. I just am humbled by words, especially being said that I'm a safety expert. I definitely don't think I'm a safety expert. I do have the nickname Safety Sarah. I have and I just hope I keep learning. And I guess that would be my big message to all of us, that Safe Kids is I've been part of Safe Kids for 22 years this whole time I've been a child care health consultant. And I just found them to be such a good resource. And I've learned from Karma, and I've learned from so many people. I learned from Tina. I mean, everybody, we just learn from each other. And I guess that's why I think it's really important for me to keep part of being active with with Safe Kids, just because I do learn so much. And then also networking, it's just like exactly what Karma said, once you get to know each other, when you're part of the coalition, you just can reach out and you have those people to go to if you have a question. Because Karma said I've helped her, but she's helped me too. So I just feel like public health, anybody that's helping families and children, I think we need each other. We definitely are a team. And so, just like I said, just to encourage us all to keep being part of Safe Kids and keep learning, because things with health and safety, especially, always change. Just one thing that even in closing that Tina said, about the carbon monoxide from boats, that I learned most recently, not today, but I did know about it, but I mean, most recently, and that is something I never thought about. That never knew that you could get carbon monoxide poisoning. And I have adult sons, so of course their mom's going to tell them, when you're hanging out on the pontoon with your buddies, this is something you guys need to be aware of, something that could definitely happen. So like I just said, just kind of nice for us to we all keep learning, and I hope I hope I never stop. So I also just wanted to thank all of you who are participating today, just in what you do every day, because we are all out there helping children too, and families. And I just feel like we need each other, and we definitely takes a village to help one another, and to look out for these families and these children that we all, care so much about. So, and I just have a little shout out too. I saw some people I know, like Katie and Haley. So I work with them at Child Care Aware, and then my friend Kayla too. She is also Carlson, so she's my friend at church, and also just another resource too with being in public health. So just thank you everybody for what you do. And then the other thing I just wanted to just say is that I really just have a passion for home safety. So in my role, so I'm a nurse, my role now, I'm a nurse, still with Child Care Aware, but my official title is Health and Safety Specialist. So with that, I help child care programs, whether they're licensed or they have to be licensed, I apologize, but whether they're in their home or in a facility, that's, they have to be licensed, but I help them in both settings. And I feel like I have such a passion for home safety because, as you guys can imagine, it's very, very overwhelming and daunting because there's just obviously so many levels to it, or can be. There's also, different people living there that don't think like you. Because I just think of my husband and I, Jared never thought of things that I would think of when we were raising our boys, just because he just didn't have that safety mind. And so different ages, it's just really hard to, I think, while we want to be, do the best that we can ensure that we have a safe environment, it's really hard because it can change all the time, because you can't really, control everybody else's behavior who live in that setting. So while you might be really safety minded, you might have a spouse or a child that's not in that level at all, or mind of thinking. So they are leaving things all over, and you're just feeling like you're constantly picking up over them. And so I guess that's my big message always for people who have homes, is that because it changes all the time, it's something that you can't just say, oh, everything's safe, I feel good. It's something that, like I just said, changes all the time. So we need to make sure that we're constantly, I don't want to say on call or vigilant, but almost so, very much so, if you look at reality, just to, go through areas of the home, do a walkthrough, was anything left out? We're all human. Like, are we really tired? I just feel like the best advice I can give too is, like, when I've gone through all the rooms when I've been home visiting, so I go into like a childcare home, and then I just ask if I can see all the areas of their home that they have access to children, or that children have access to, and I just walk through, and just a different set of eyes, I always say, because this is, I think, once you're in your home, you kind of get blinders on, and you don't all of a sudden realize what is there. Could be a very blatant potential hazard, but you just either didn't know about it, because that's usually the other thing, which I'm sure as all of us who enter homes, we just think you don't know what you don't know, so you can't always feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they didn't know that. And then also, I think we can't assume that everybody knows what safety hazards are, because that can't be guaranteed anymore. Common sense can't be guaranteed anymore. So it's just like everything, and I always think, if I present it in a nice way, where I care about you, and I just noticed that something here that maybe you didn't even think about, could be unsafe. I think that that's a nice way to present it, because sometimes it gets hard, I think, as we enter homes, because they have ownership of their home. And then I think that that's hard, because we might feel like, oh, I don't want to offend them in any way, because that's something they're proud of, and they might obviously live differently than we do, and have different standards of safety or different standards of cleanliness. And then once again, so that gets hard. But I think or at least what I try to do is, oh my gosh, like if I see something that's not safe, I go, Sarah, can you say this? And you just always try to think of, like I just said, bringing it towards an awareness that I care about you. And I just wanted you to know I did notice this, and this is my job, just to be aware of these things. And I'm just pointing it out to you just so that you're aware. And then I feel like, as we all know, we can't guarantee they're going to change their the way they are, but I'm hoping that at least I feel better leaving that I gave them that information and that they can make more of an educated decision than if they do have the information brought forth to them. So that's hard too, because like I just think of I'm also a talker, so I'm sorry. So I'll try to whip it up here, but I just think like when I look into some things that come to mind is, they had a butane lighter out, and we were just doing a walkthrough, and the provider's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, but she had, she meant to put it away before she went to bed, but she didn't. Or if they leave cleaners out, they were cleaning and the night before, but they just forgot, because they got tired or they got a phone call and then they went to bed because they were all exhausted. And so, you just know how things can happen. So that's why, like I just said, the walkthroughs are really important, just to periodically just see if there's something that we need to take care of that one of our other family members left out, or something that we left out because we were just too darn tired to do it. So those are things that I think about, and I'm trying to think. Okay, now I really will zip it. So sorry, Tina. So next I'm going to say windows. So children are more likely to die or be severely injured from window-related falls than falls associated from any other product. Next slide, please. So prevention tips is to move those chairs, cribs, or other furniture away from the windows, because obviously we just don't want them to have access to them. So as much as we can try to prevent them from having access to them. And then some, depending on how much force they have, they can always like crash into the window too. So I just think of all that happening. So just like I said, move away the furniture. Screens are just not meant for humans, they're meant for bugs. So we just can never think that, oh, I got this windows open, but I have the screen. The screen really will give way to a child's body. So we just can't assure that will protect them. And just to always remember the head entrapment. So meaning that you want to make sure that any opening is less than 3.5 inches. Because if it's greater than that, with that 3.5 inch to 9 inch, it's just enough for an infant or a child's, doesn't have to be an infant, but a child's body to get through, but not their head. Because like we learned before, their head is probably one of the largest parts of their body, sometimes a 1/4 of their body size. So then that's where we wouldn't want, obviously, their little body to get through, but their head would get caught. Next slide, please. Stairways and halls, this is just another place, obviously, that we can have injuries. So just because they are pretty appealing to infants and children, just because of crawling and that access to get there. So that's why we have to make sure that they're safe. Next slide, please. So prevention tips, things that I think about is that to make sure all the stairways are well lit, the carpets on the stairways should be tightly secured or installed, and edges should not be frayed. And so you're not slipping. And then stairways should be free from objects and clutter at all times. I know a lot of people tend to put items on their stairs, because you think, oh, I'll set it on the stairs, because then when I go upstairs, I'll bring it upstairs. But if we can just try to prevent doing that, that'll just help try to keep hazards off there. The other thing I think of is railings. So if you do have railings along, like if you have an open side, because sometimes that'll happen, like either that's the design of the home where there'll be an open side to the basement, the lower level. Just if you do have railings there, once again, that would be another hazard that could potentially be there, that you want the spaces less than 3.5 inches, because it's at an elevated surface. So therefore, if the little body got through, the head could get entrapped. So just to remember that too. Next slide, please. So with stairs, the handrail should be installed on at least one side and continuous extend all the way down. It is recommended to install the baby gates at the top and the bottom of stairways, because for sure at the top, but then bottoms obviously are helpful if you don't want to have those children try to get up and crawl the stairs when you're not going to be able to visualize them, because that could be a potential hazard. And then just to remember, what they want us to remember is baby gates should always be wall mounted if they're at the top of the stairs. Bottom of the stairs, they do not need to be, but the bottom or the top, excuse me, you'd like them to be, just because we can't assure that those pressure tension gates will actually make sure that that will be something that would protect them if they were to fall against that, because then the whole gate could come down, and obviously that would be an injury. The other thing that that we've just found that could be a safety hazard is when you have those walk-through panels, they're very small, very small. Like, I'm always like, who do they think is going to get through here? Because it's a very narrow panel, and so when you open that panel and you're trying to get through, you might get caught up on it, or if you definitely are carrying anything, that could get caught on the edges. And then the other thing to think about is that bar that runs on the bottom, that you could trip on it, because there's usually something that has the bar along the floor line, and that something could grab your toe, it could fall. So really, if you're going to be having a gate at the top, it probably would be the best to have an open swing gate that the whole design is where the whole, so you'd have the whole space of the stairway to get down versus just through this walk-through panel. You might find that that is a safer option. Next slide, please. Baby walkers, and yes, Karma obviously talked about this. Baby walkers are very hazardous, and I would strongly recommend no one use them. And unfortunately, they are still made, which is unfortunate, or recirculating. But the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends absolutely not to use them. And as you can see, so 2,000 children every year are treated in hospitals for injuries due to these walkers. And many times, 90% of these incidents led to the head and neck injuries. And the most common cause of an injury was falling down the stairs, because, like Karma said, because it's on wheels, I would imagine nobody's going to put them at the top of the stairs, but they got there because of the wheels. So we just want to make sure that that's something not accessible to them, or they're not used. The other thing is that they're able to get to places that they wouldn't normally be able to get, like we said, the stairs, but also to things, you know, as far as if there's cords or outlets, or like Tina said too, grabbing if it's something's on a tablecloth or something, that they're able to pull something down onto themselves. So we would just prefer that they're not, and that they instead would use an activity walker that is stabilized. And so with that, and just so you guys are aware, what I always tell people is that if it is an exerciser or stationary infant equipment, that some of them will rock, and then that could also be a hazard. So there should be stabilization legs underneath them, so that they're not at a tilting surface, and that they are able to be more of a stable, upright position at all times. And it's not so much always for the infant that's using it, but it could be if you have other infants, like in childcare, that could be trying to pull up on the little exerciser, the stationary equipment from the outside. That's something that they could potentially cause the fall of the child who's using it, or them themselves could fall because it's not a stable pull-up surface. So things that I think about that. Next slide, please. Sorry. I already kind of talked through about this. If you do use anything stationary, that we just recommend that anytime, we call it restrictive equipment for infants, we would recommend 15 minutes, 2 times a day, no more than that. And the reason being is just because we want to have children to be able to have floor time, because that's how they develop their upper body strength and their whole gross motor, because we want them not to just be in a device. We want to make sure that they have time to develop all of those to strengthen those muscles, and that will help them with infant sleep as well, which we know to prevent SIDS, so that they're able to develop those head and neck, shoulder muscles and upper body strength. So that's where that is. So floor time is recommended. I do hear from some people that they use like restrictive equipment many times just because they tell me to protect infants. So if you do have, like, if there is a parent who has maybe a new baby and then they have older children, or, you know, and they're worried about the safety of the, you know, the other children maybe stepping on them or crawling on them, obviously that wouldn't be ideal, and that could be a hazard in itself. But I try to tell people that then think about ways that we can protect that infant, but still give them a flat surface to play on. So meaning a playpen, you know, they it's typically used for sleep, or many people use pack and place for sleep now, but just that you could use it for play too, if you can just have them, you know, have a safe place where they can roll around and have free movement. But then we're protecting them from other children and they're not kind of enclosed in something, or in a piece of equipment, excuse me. But the other thing then, obviously, I always think about sleep. You know, we just want to make sure that if you are allowing anybody to play in there with toys, then we're checking them if they do fall asleep, that we remove all the toys and any hazards that could be in there, and that they're always on their back for sleep. So just remembering those things as well, just because like Karma said, we never want to have a safe thing become an unsafe thing. So we've got to have two sides of the brain thinking here. So just so like I said, to do that. Another thing that people sometimes do is just put a little bit of a gate around the infants area, that way they can have floor time, but then protect them from other children's active play if you are concerned about that. And then always just to make sure infants are ready to use the equipment too, because sometimes I see little babies being put in things where they should have upper body strength enough, like in an exerciser, but they really are leaning over because they truly are not ready for it. So then therefore, if you go into a home and they maybe just need to wait and they're just not developmentally ready to be put in a stationary activity center. Next slide, please. Then I'm going to go with the furniture and bunk beds. So just that children often fall off furniture, out of beds, and out of high chairs. So with that, I guess I just always can't stress enough that if you're using a high chair, just always use safety straps and to make sure that they fit properly. Just because many times people, at least when I see that if they're being used, they typically are tucked back behind the, or if they're on the high chair, excuse me, they're tucked back behind the not mattress, but the cushions on the high chair, and they just don't want to mess with them. So I always go and make sure they're pulled out, and then I just am like, you know, just so you know that we do have children that fall out of these elevated surfaces, and we really need to put the please use the safety straps and please adjust them so they fit them properly. 'Cause sometimes I just see that they're clipped, but they're so loosey-goosey, like there's so much room on there that the child could easily fall out anyway. So we just want to make sure that that's always, plus the straps themselves can become a strangulation hazard. So if they were really loose and a child maybe wasn't being observed like they should be, they could potentially get that around their neck, and then they could choke or excuse me, not choke, but get strangled. So just thinks of that. If they're ever at an elevated surface, then we want to make sure that they're in sight. And another area I just always think of that too, dealing with falls is diapering surfaces, because I have dealt with childcare programs too that have had, I did have one that fell off a changing table and got a skull fracture. So we just need to make sure that we're just always, anytime, to remind parents or whoever taking care of kids, if you ever have a child with diapering, just never to leave them, because we don't know if today will be the day that they learn how to roll over, because that's sometimes what's given to me too, is they're like, well, they're not rolling yet, Sarah. And I just said, and that's great, but today could be the day, because that's where children, we just never can tell when that skill is going to be developed or learned. And we just always need to be vigilant. Like I said, always think that they could fall off. So you just always want to keep your hand on them or your body close to them. Next slide, please. So prevention tips for furniture and bunk beds. Just never let children play or climb on furniture, beds, or appliances. Not to allow children to play or jump on bunk beds. They actually recommend that you wait till they're 6 before that they would sleep on the top bunk. So developmentally, they just feel like we should wait that long. So just for, I know little people think the top bunk is so cool, but just to try to, you know, discourage them from doing that. And then also with dealing with head entrapment. So if we all just remember that magic number, anytime you have a space, you would like it to be less than 3.5 inches, because that's where, like I said, if we know that that's less, then we're good. But if it's greater, if it's 3.5 or greater, especially in that gray area, then you could have where we said a body could get through, but not the head. So that can help happen on the guardrails as well from the top bunk. that you might find that a little body could get through, but not the head. So that's where they could get strangled. So, and trapped. So we just want to make sure. The other thing is not allowing children to wear, play with belts, straps, purses with long handles, necklaces, clothing with drawstrings or bathrobes on the top bunk, because that's something too that because of it, either, you know, of the posts themselves, or you can get it caught on something, just that is something that could potentially strangle them. So we just don't want that to happen. And that kind of leads to the next bullet, purchasing bunk beds without the corner posts or finials on the top bunk, because that's something obviously that is easily, things can get caught on. And you just want to make sure that the bunk bed has not been recalled by the CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission. And if you guys are ever interested, or families, you can sign up for their recalls. You'll get a lot of emails, but you can go on there and just sign up and give them your email address, and they'll send you all of the recalls that are current. And plus, you can always go there to check if things have been recalled. And then, as we know, with anything in our homes, things have wear and tear, especially when you have a bunk bed, they can get loose on the top. You want to make sure that, you know, just because people are crawling up and down, you might find that the top bunk can get looser faster than anything else, just because you have a whole body crawling up there. So that's where I think it's really important to just check the stability periodically to make sure that it does feel solid, that there's no hardware that's becoming loose or for sure missing, but just always making sure that that's in place. Next slide, please. So now we're going to just talk about trips, slips, and fall hazards. Once again, kind of goes back to clutter, you know, so I just always think of, obviously with children, there's lots of toys, there's lots of things that can be in the way. So we just need to try our best. Obviously, toys are going to get out, and they can't keep all their toys picked up all the time, but just so we're kind of thinking of the traffic areas that, you know, where a person's walking, can we keep those clear so that we're not tripping and falling? Especially if things get wet, you know, so I think of bathrooms and kitchens, you know, wherever there's a water source, as there's stuff that got on the floor that somebody can fall in, or spilling too, that is for food or drink. But then also just thinking of the carpet, or if you have a rug, you know, a lot of people like decorative rugs, and could they be actually a hazard instead of something that's good? So just to be mindful of that, and shoes as well. So next slide, please. So things that you can do is to place non-slip liners under rugs or remove the rugs altogether, kind of like what I just said. Sometimes there's those can be a hazard, and sometimes you might find that the non-slip liners might not work the best that you think that they should. And then just keeping those passages and stairways clear. Teach children to put away toys. I think that's just a good thing for them to learn anyway. But like I said, it's sometimes hard to keep everything picked up all the time. When you're having in the bath, non-slip bath mats and rugs are nice, especially even if you're right there with little people. If the bottom's really slippery, they can fall to just trying to stand up and just slipping. So we wouldn't want that to happen. So we just want to make sure that that is something. And as adults too, because I'm pretty clumsy. My other nickname is Grace, so I'm Grace and Safety Sarah. So I can fall a lot. So yep, I don't want to fall either in the bathtub, or shower. So just having that for all of us, I think, is important. And like I said, immediately clean up any spills on floors. And then another thing is just that to install the corner cushions or hearth guards to protect children from hard or sharp surfaces. Next slide, please. So with balconies, stairways, porches, and decks, I know you've heard that number a lot with 3.5 inches, but that is so true. So it's really anywhere a railing can be on an elevated surface. So if there's an elevation where a body's going to fall down to the ground, if there's spaces there, that could be, like I just said, if they're less than 3.5 inches, that's good. But if they're 3.5 inches or greater, then that's where, like I said, the body can get through, but not the head. Next slide, please. And I already talked about this too. So things I didn't really say that what you could do. So there are those barriers that you can get some safety netting. And that's something I know Safe Kids has provided in the past as well. And there's different ones you can buy at other places too, but just to have a safety netting that you can attach to the railing itself. That's something that could prevent a child from coming through. There's also been kind of almost like a plastic sheeting roll that I've also seen that you can line along the back of the railing and adhere it to with ties along each banister pole, just so that to try to find a way, obviously, to secure it. But just to think about that could be something you might want to take care of if you have surfaces or areas like that. Next slide, please. This was one design I know that I know, but just one that I wanted to bring forth, just because I know that this is something I have seen in homes where you have these couches, or people think that they are doing a good thing because they think, oh, I'm covering up, children from having access to the railings so that they will be less likely to play with them, which is, yes, that's a nice first thought. But then I always tell the provider, I'm like, oh, but think about what, it can get them to a higher level to have them catapult over the side. And obviously that would be a very serious injury because they truly would be falling from one level of a home to the next. So then that would obviously be something that, or I have given guidance about before. I'm just like, you might consider, or if it were me, or just please think about this, that your little sweetheart could get right on the couch and catapult over. So you would, it'd be recommended to remove that and move it to a different place, a location, and then we could always find a safety guard then for the actual railing itself. And then, okay, next slide, please. And so we had talked about kind of some things that we can do. So there's that safety netting on the left that I had talked about. That's something that can protect children from coming in or getting through those railings themselves. And then we talked about the safety gates too. And that is, you can tell, is a tension design, and it wouldn't be one that you could mount to the sides of which would be recommended more at a bottom. In between rooms, you can do it that way, or at the bottom of stairs, but not at the top of stairs, please. Next slide. So indoor play equipment, just so you guys are aware of, which I'm sure you are, is that carpet is something that is not, well, it's just hard. First of all, North Dakota. Okay, so we know that we're going to be inside a lot. So unfortunately, due to our long winters, we want to go outside as much as we can. But I know when our temperatures get really tough, or the weather gets tough, we tend to stay inside and kids kind of go crazy. So I always try to think, or I know a lot of people want to provide gross motor play. So they want to put indoor climbers in their homes, or they want to put something where they can climb, run, jump, things like that, slides. And just so you know, which is surprising, is that anything over 18 inches, so that's not very high, what they recommend is that it's placed over protective surfacing, which carpet is not. So it would be over a mat. And then that's what's hard too, because then if you truly want to be doing a nice job, the mats should be approved as protective surfacing for playground equipment. And that you want to make sure that it's ASTM, so that's the American Society for Testing Materials, F1292. And not that so much you have to remember that number, but it's just so much that you should see that it's, that it meets the ASTM standards as playground safety, or playground surfacing. Just because mats, there's tons you can buy at home stores, that are just made pretty much for either for decorative, because they're really cute. And they give you a little protection, but they aren't meant or designed to sustain a large fall that could protect a head or a body. So then that's what's hard about them. And then two, mats can also be a potential tripping hazard, because I know for one, there was this incident where to protect a child from a 3-foot, or they did a study from a 3-foot fall, they needed 4 inches high of a mat. And so then, or that's what they're putting under it, but then that didn't make sense. Or as we can all imagine, like if you have a 4-inch mat to go underneath this, for one, your stability will probably be changed for the actual structure. And then number two, you're also going to find that children might trip just trying to get up to onto the mat. So you might find obviously that we are once again creating a safety hazard with something that was designed to try to keep children safe. It's also recommended to provide a fall zone around the play equipment. So then that's where we think of, just so you know, it's 3 feet, kind of think of a 3 feet radius around any equipment that is for children 2 and under, because just because of their body size, if they were to fall off, they probably wouldn't go much further than that. So that's why the 3 feet is. So kind of, like I said, a perimeter around the whole piece of equipment. For anyone older than that, they say 6 feet. So that might be something that's really hard, but I always tell people at least do your best. So you kind of just think of whatever area you've got in your home that you'd pull away the climber. So at least it's not a wall. You're not going that, you're trying to get as much space from anything that they could potentially fall onto. So that's just something to think about. And then once again, it's just always having supervision when children are using equipment. Next slide, please. So I just put this little picture here. I know Karma also had that picture of talking about where you guys saw, and I've already alluded to it, where as children, as we develop, we change a lot just in our body structure. So meaning of how our anatomy is, and that's where our center of gravity would be. So if you look on this chart, if you look at the sweetheart, that's 2-year-old, their center of gravity is in their chest. So then if you have a 5-year-old, then it's at the waistline. And then if you look at, or right above the waist, excuse me. And then if you look at the 12-year-old, it's pretty much where it will be even in the middle of their body, right at their waist. So this just means obviously that when we lean forward, we have more chance of us bringing ourselves back. But obviously, if you look at a little 2-year-old, they're kind of top heavy. I always think of Jimmy Neutron, if you guys can remember Jimmy Neutron, but he's a little guy with a big brain. So if he leans forward, obviously, then if he goes over his feet, he most likely would fall forward. It'd be hard for him or her to bring themselves back to a standing position. Next slide. And so this is where I really don't like little tykes, and I have issues with them, and I've told them that. I mean, I've just said, could you just please, your design is not really, even though you should know children, isn't designed as such. Because if you look at, for one, I just want to point out, we talked about fall zone, like this is not a good fall zone, because if you look at behind them, you have concrete blocks or bricks. So this would be something you want to move away from there, because what if a little sweetheart all of a sudden, lost their balance and fell backwards, they can get a head injury. You also want to look what's forward, that you have these stepping stones, even though it's on grass, you have the stepping stones there at the end of the slide. So that's something that they could get a head injury to. So, or any type of injury, just because that would be a hard surface. So you just want to make sure wherever it's placed that you place it somewhere that's safe. And then going back to the little tykes. So what I have issues with is that, you crawl up the slide and then they'd have to lean way down to get to the handles, which if you think about it, then they have to go forward. And then if you're leaning forward, I've already got a big brain. And so I'm leaning forward and that might project them to just come down. Plus the little standing surface, the platform, because I used to be a certified playground safety inspector. That is something you should have for 14 inches to have a platform on top. So that gives you enough space so that they can come from their standing position to a seated position and slide down. But that doesn't even allow that child to do that either. So it's just kind of, they're set up not for success. So that's what I just wanted to point out too, that there's some or just the design can be definitely a hazard. Next slide, please. So kind of how I talked about before, dealing with the mats. Like I said, you might find these colorful mats sold lots of places. Like I've seen them, Home Depot, Target, everywhere. So and obviously what I tell childcare providers is sure better than nothing. I would prefer that you get something that's made for playground safety or playground surfacing that's designed or created for that, because they actually test them too to see for critical height, to see what height they would protect a child for a fall from. But as we all know, at least it's better than nothing. So if it was over another surface and they weren't going to move it, at least I tried to tell them that we could put, and it was a hard surface, sorry, then I would tell them that obviously this would be better than nothing. So, but most, the statistics high, 80% of all playground related injuries involve falls to the surface or falls onto equipment. And falls account for the most playground related injuries. They're mostly the head injuries and fractures. And just so you know, kind of what happens is, once again, if you guys can imagine, when you have the younger kids, because they're top heavy and then they fall forward, they also don't have the development yet to know to I need to put my hands out to stop me. So usually they face plant. So that's why we get more head injuries and we get more face injuries with little people. Once they start getting around 4 years old, then we seem to see more hand injuries and some more fractures. And what happens there is they are starting to be like, hey, I'm falling forward, I'm going to put my hands out, but then trying to stop myself, but it hurts, or my arms can't handle it. So we get fractures. So then that's something that we find. But head trauma is probably the most, the highest type of injury that we're going to see on playgrounds. So next slide, please. And this I just wanted to point out too, because I know that there has been a child death. You'll see these different types of cargo netting, and that just helps, the child is supposed to be for them to climb up, but just that itself can be a hazard, where I know there's been at least one death I remember that where the child's head got inside of there and the child strangled just because their head got in one of those little squares. So they just say that head entrapment can happen if the opening is between 17 and 29 or 28 inches. So just kind of an FYI that's another hazard that potentially could be there too. Next slide, please. So prevention tips with playgrounds, things that I think about are definitely that clothing can get too, I don't know if I'm on there, but that's one thing too, that just another FYI that any clothing that has any of those things, we kind of talked about that. So if they've got straps, if they have, because I'm on another group too, and that's where most of the death has been happening, is from clothing getting caught on the actual equipment. So strings from hoodies, things like that get caught in small areas, and that's what's causing the strangulation to happen. So, but things that we can always check are broken toys and equipment. Think about North Dakota weathers. I always think of plastics. They don't like water, they don't like water and cold, so they can crack. And then that is something just to check. If bolts or anything, hardware is definitely loose or missing, just to kind of periodically check the stability of it and see if anything's protruding. And I crawl under it too. Like I just think of a child, of where are they going to play? They usually are crawling underneath it, like, hey, this is cool, I'm under here, I'm building a fort, or I'm going to hide out from these guys or the bad guys or whatever. So I always crawl underneath there too, just to try to see if anything's poking down that, somehow is going to hurt them if they're playing under the platforms too, because that is how kids play. So to think about that, obviously, if there's, things with aluminum or metal, they can be burns. You can have chipping paint, rust, things like that. Wood treated, if there's splinters, if it's CCA treated, so that's chromium, copper arsenate. So that's an arsenic based preservative that wood was treated with, and so therefore that would be something that could cause cancer. They're not supposed to make treated wood with that anymore, but if we're not sure of the age of it, like of how long it was created, then we just want to make sure that, or when it was built, I'm sorry, then we just want to make sure that we cover it with a protective sealer, just so that CCA doesn't leach out into their hands or on their skin. And that's why hand washing is such an important thing to do too after they play from outside, because we don't know what they're touching. Also plastic equipment, I already said, could break. Guardrails, they just usually say that if anything's 30 inches, that we want to make sure that there's a guardrail to protect them from a fall to the surface, because that's too high. Fences can be helpful, but they also can be a hazard too if there's things, just to make sure that things aren't poking or protruding from the fencing it themselves, or once again, the spacing in between them. Just so that that's not something that they can get through or could get caught on. And then another thing too, just to be watching our safety straps if they're missing or broken, just to let somebody know where to fix it, because that could be obviously a hazard. And unattached ropes are another thing that have really been causing deaths just from like an unattached rope. So that's something that can get around the child's head, obviously, or around their neck. So sorry. And then that way they could strangle themselves because it should be attached at the top and the bottom. So that it's just used as a something to aid them in climbing, but something that can't be used as a noose. Next slide, please. S-hooks, so just something to think about that too, that those are usually used for attachment to different, you'll probably notice these anytime that you're, especially with swings, they'll be at the top of the frame, holding the swing itself to the actual frame of the swing, but then it also be attached to the seat itself. So with that, you always want to have a closed S, so that would be on the right. And then if you have an open S, then that's where we found either the seat itself can become dislodged or come off the frame. But also what can happen is that if you're, you could get clothing caught on it or something where that could be a potential for a strangulation hazard. So just always making sure those S hooks are closed. Next slide, please. And these types of seats just aren't ideal. They are just found that many times, anytime we have a multi-use seat, we just don't like to see these on any playground structure just because a lot of children are hurt from another child just because once again, they're kids, they're not always going to be mindful of another swing coming in front of them or around them, and they could hit them. And then of course that would hurt anyway. It could cause an injury with one child's body on there. But if you have two children's body on there, and that way it would increase the force even more weight would be behind that hit and could cause a greater injury to the child or whoever's passing by. So we just would rather that it would be just a one-person use instead of more than one body. Next slide, please. And prevention for playgrounds, just that avoid asphalt, concrete, grass, and soil surfaces under the playground equipment. It's accessible to use loose fill materials. And then that's where you would be finding the wood chips, P-rock, fine sand, and shredded rubber. And unfortunately, there's nothing perfect. So I tell people it kind of depends on the age of child that you have. For one, you should always have an initial fill of 12 inches. So that's pretty deep. And then you'd want to maintain it at 9 inches deep underneath any type of equipment. So that's the first rule. But then also, what are you going to use? So if you use sand is a good one in the way that at least nobody can, for young people, because it's not a choking hazard. The thing is with sand, which I guess we would all know, is it's pretty windy here, so you might find that it displaces easily. The other thing is that if it's open or available to pets that or animals, that it could be used as definitely as a litter box, and that you might have poop in it then. So that's not desirable. So then that's something to think about and to always monitor that. If you do have that, P-rock is something that we just want to be careful with little people because it could be shoved in their ears, nose, as well as choked on. So that's something that's not ideal either. So just kind of thinking about that. And then that we said that, and then just the whole importance of just, like I just said, to just always be checking. I didn't say, but it displaces easily. So if you want to make sure to do kick out areas, underneath the bottom of slides and underneath swings tends to displace quite easily just because they're high use areas. So then just periodically raking or just trying to move that surfacing back to where it would be important to also to do that. Next slide, please. And I already said that, I apologize. So next slide, please. And then two, just the things just to always remember, I think for all of us, because that most playgrounds are designed for 5 to 12-year-olds. So this would be something that would be, like I said, if you go to a public playground, I think a lot of people don't know that or are surprised by that. So a lot of people with younger children tend to go to those places. There aren't a lot that are developed for children that are under 5. They're starting to get better, but just know that that's something that you might find is pretty common. So always keep that in mind, or like I said, 5 to 12-year-olds. Another thing that unfortunately what happens is that a lot of times they're on the park districts or on a school, if they're available, that unfortunately they're just they're kind of lowest on their checklist. So meaning they have so many other duties that we just can't always assure that they're monitored or maintained the way we would like them to. So I always tell people, before you let children use it, look in the slide to see if there's anything, because there's vandalism too. Unfortunately, people put maybe poop in there, dog poop, sharp objects, glass. I know the people that taught us when I took the training were from California, and they said people put contaminated needles, razor blades in between in tunnel slides, just awful, awful things that people you wouldn't even think could imagine to do that. And I'm not saying I have never heard that that's here, but I'm just saying I think I would always look inside the slide, see before a little sweetheart got in it, walk on it yourself, see if there's anything that needs to be off, check the perimeter to see if there's any things that are unsafe and things like that. I think that those things are really important. And then of course, if they are icy or if they're wet, children can slip and fall. So that's something. And then we already talked about animal waste. And if you do notice anything unsafe, please to always make sure that you report it to the park district just so that they do know and that they can get that addressed. And then I just always think too, to bring your first aid kit. I think that that's really important, and just everything. I think if nothing, no message is more important than supervision, just that we actively need to supervise children at all times. And that doesn't mean having a book and sitting there outside while the kids play, it's being vigilant, keeping our eyes on the kids. Just because, as we all know, too, kids, even you can give them a totally safe environment and they can find a way to get hurt just because they're curious. And that's what's wonderful about kids, and they try things out, but they can get hurt. So supervision. Next slide, please. Clothing and shoes, just things I just think about there too, is just making sure we already talked about kind of with our clothing, but the other itself, but shoes, just because I think that that's so important too. I've been to watch children many times that are in cowboy boots or flip-flops or things, and they're trying to climb this equipment, and obviously that just doesn't help them, and it can actually cause them more injury, especially like for active play or trying to climb. It doesn't give their shoe or their foot stability when they're trying to transfer from different locations, and to prevent injuries. So as much as we can to advocate or to recommend to children and to parents to please send them in shoes that are closed-toed, rubber-soled, tie secure to their foot. They'll be able to be safer on the equipment and less likely to get hurt. And then the other thing I always think about are bike helmets, which we, once again, going back to Karma's statement, we have a safe thing because they'll ride their bike to the playground. Awesome. We want to have them have the helmet on then. Great. But then please take it off, because we should only have the helmet on when we're on wheeled equipment, just so that we don't, because that's another thing that happens, is that the helmet itself keeps them where they get caught in things, and then the straps on, and then that could strangle them. So we're making a safe thing unsafe. So just remember that too. Next slide, please. Trampolines, lots of kids love them, but just not recommended. They're not approved by the AP. So if a provider, and I'm sorry, I put provider on there. I'm used to talking to childcare providers, but if you do have one or the family has one, just to, adult supervision at all times, only one jumper at a time is recommended. No somersaults or flips, which I know you're like, oh my gosh, fun sucker, but what happens is obviously that's where we find a lot of injuries is to their head and neck, because they come down on it, of when trying to do these flips or these acrobats on, acrobatic movements on there, and they're just not developmentally ready, and then they can get hurt. So that's where it's not recommended. You want to check the equipment often. Even the small ones aren't recommended. I go into homes too that I see these, and obviously that's just not something. If somebody were ever to use it, I just tell them that then a parent should be, or an adult should be, right next to them. And some of them will have the handlebars on there, because sometimes with sensory issues with some children that have special needs, that's something that they can do. But then if that's something they can do, it should just be a controlled, definitely closely supervised activity. Someone's always there, and then it's put away, where it's not just willy-nilly just left out for kids to play on whenever they want to. So that's something too. And then just to check homeowners' policy for coverage if it is ever in there, just because that might affect that, because there could be. And then just making sure that you keep the netting should always be on there, as you guys can imagine, at all times. Never use it without a net. But then also maybe if it is left outside, I just tell people too to always make sure that there's nothing, like no ladders, no step stools, no furniture that a child could just all of a sudden go and if you weren't watching or knew where they were, that they could potentially go put it up next to the trampoline and get on it without you knowing. So it's just keeping all that access equipment away. Next slide, please. And I don't know, Tina, do you want to just say this? Because I feel like that's you and you can tell what you have.
Of course. Yeah. So we do have some display items. If you were doing a booth, we have a case that has a lot of different playground options for surfacing that families can look at. We drop golf balls on it to see which ones bounce, which ones don't. So emphasize the need of appropriate surfacing. We have trifold displays that can be used. And then, of course, these are our playground tips. This is our tip sheet here that can be checked out or can be printed off of our website, or you can request it on your request sheet.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go fast, you guys. I know I'm such jabberjaws. Okay, so choking, we're going to move into do not give to children under 5 hard foods such as raw carrots, celery, frozen peas, nuts or popcorn is what they say is most commonly what people choke on. And just to avoid hard candy, chewing gum, lollipops, cough drops, as it can tell there. And then think about even children with soft candies with firm textures such as the jelly, gel, or the gummy candy, especially if they're not ready for it or if they have a lot of them, that might be too big of an amount and they could choke even on because they have too many. So just kind of us thinking about that. And make sure kids are always seated when they're eating and not running around laughing. The other ones I always think about are when driving too. I know it'd be really easy to give kids food to eat while you're driving, but then that could be what happens if they choke. You don't have that immediate, because you might be in what kind of traffic or kind of situation that what are you going to do? And that you could get in an accident or something where you're in trying to stop, or obviously your child needs your help and you can't help them, or the child needs to. So just be like, sorry, bud, but we can't have any food while we drive. So that would be something else that I would recommend. Next slide, please. So things with food, I just always want to tell people that it's actually recommended to cut food up for children. 1/4 of an inch for infants and 1/2 inch for toddlers is what's recommended. So that's something to think about. And then also just to be mindful of not having circular items, and that would be a hot dog. That would be string cheese is another one that sometimes people don't think about, but it's the same thing as a hot dog. So it's a cylinder object. So then that's something that children is round. Grapes obviously are high on, cherry tomatoes, things like that. Anything that's round or cylinder can cause such a good plug for their airway. So we just want to make sure that their or I should say their esophagus. So you want to make sure that you go lengthwise, but also crosswise too. So all the way down, but then also across, because even if you cut up grapes in a circular, they still would be a circle. So we just want to make sure we go both ways. Next slide. And that's kind of just the other one. I just was trying to think of pictures. So to actually show that, once again, that you want to go 1/2 inch for toddlers, 1/4 inch for infants, and to cut up those two, please. Next slide, please. And just going one more thing about eating, always just keep them in their sight, because that's something I just always think of, because choking is silent. So I think that that's the most important thing for us to remember that. And I know that many times when children are eating, we just think, oh my gosh, I know where they are. Like I can go run to the bathroom, or I'm going to go put this load of laundry in, or, so we can just always remind our parents or providers, just that childcare providers that this is a high risk activity with them eating. So, and we can't rely on other kids telling us if Jimmy's choking. So just always be vigilant, always keep your eyes on them. Obviously, if you can't sit at the table with them, just always keep your eyeballs on them. So if you get up and you're doing other things, just always have your eyes. Cause like I said, hearing's not going to help you because they'll be silent. So you just want to make sure that you always have them in your sight. And this picture just kind of shows obviously a choke tube. So that's on your far left. And that would be what you could use to check to see, or that's what the Consumer Product Safety Commission uses to test when they ever are using, when you see not not acceptable. This toy should not be used by children under 3. This is meaning it did not pass this test. So if it ever fits in here and meaning then 2, then that you wouldn't want to use it with the child under 3 is what's recommended. And so the other thing that is on, obviously, that we all recognize, the toilet paper tube. That's something that you can use that you have in your home. So then that's something, because I haven't found choke tubes to be very readily accessible in stores. And another thing about it is the CPSC also said that round objects should be less than 1 3/4 inch. So then in order to just catch everything, if you use a toilet paper tube, everybody's got one. And then that way you can just, if a toy passes through there, then you want to not use that with children under 3 is what's recommended. And then the picture on the right are the balloons, and the CPSC actually recommends not to allow balloons by anybody under 8, which I know surprises a lot of people, but they broken pieces. What they do is they can actually to give a really good seal, and so you can't breathe, and they're really hard to get out, obviously, because there's not really an object, so it's not that you wouldn't find a solid object. It's gonna be a lot easier for someone to expel out of there if they were choking. But if this kind of just is such a small thin membrane of material, that it actually can be very hazardous. So no latex balloons for those under 8 is what's recommended. Next slide, please. And just that, another thing I think of too, just because we're thinking about things not to make safety things, that is outlet covers. So if you, obviously we want our outlets to be covered, but that'd be another thing to kind of think about, that you don't want to have a safe, what we're trying to keep safe, have it be a hazard. So once again, does a safety cover for an outlet fit in the toilet paper tube? Then that would be ideal, because then that could be something, obviously, that could be a choking hazard. So just checking those. The other things I always think about that we commonly have are like marker covers, covers of pens, pretty things for hair, like these little kids that have beautiful little tiny little barrettes or whatever. They're super cute, but then if they fall out, that's a choking hazard, or they pull them out, or another child pulls them out, then they can choke on those. So those are things that I think about too. And then just choking reminder, just that I think it's important for all of us to learn CPR so that we can make sure that we can, and the Heimlich, so we can assist somebody who's choking. And then obviously if someone needs emergency care with the CPR. So I think that it's important for all of us. So next slide, please. And there you go, Tina.
These are some of the resources that we have available. And I will say that when we talk to our kids, when we're doing Safe at Home Alone or our Smart Sitter, we do talk about Heimlich maneuver. We talk about basics of CPR, but it's well worth mentioning to families that they should take a CPR class. Okay, so when we talk about infant carrying devices, is this me, Sarah, or is this you?
Sorry, I thought that was you, but I can
Perfect.
talk
Nope,
too.
got it. Nope, I've got it. So we are professionals with car seats. We talk a lot about car seats, but one of the things that we really want to talk about is car seats within the context of safe sleep. Car seats are safe when they are used correctly and installed correctly at the right angle inside of a vehicle. Once an infant carrier is removed from the vehicle and from its safe angle that is installed at, it is no longer a safe sleep surface for a baby. So when we have babies in those infant carriers, absolutely the family could carry that child into whatever whatever their destination is. But if the child is in there, they need to be removed from it. If they are sleeping, they need to be removed from the car seat and they need to be placed on a flat surface. Because these devices, they tip over, the child can slump down and cut off their own airway through positional asphyxiation. There's soft surfaces that they can end up getting pressed against so that they're unable to have their airway clear. And that leads to these children then having trouble breathing, or they're breathing in carbon dioxide. So it's really, really important that these surfaces are not used for sleeping. So we don't ever want to place those things on beds, chairs, sofas. We don't want to place them on any surface except for having them locked into their base or installed in the car seat. When they are, in the car seat for a brief moment, if they're going to set them down, they have to be set maybe on the floor, so that there is no potential for that child to reach for something and topple off of a elevated surface or anything like that. These devices, if you are carrying a child within them, they need to still be properly strapped in that carrier. Sometimes families will have an urge to loosen up the harness because the child seems uncomfortable. However, they should always be buckled in and tight with that pinch test, even when they are not installed in the car. That way, not only are they going to stay inside of that carrier and not topple out, the loosened straps then don't pose a strangulation risk for that child. We want to keep a hand on the baby at all times when using the carrier. Oftentimes families will want to carry it with just the handle alone, maybe because their other arm is full of another child or their groceries or whatever. But it's important that one hand is on the base of that carrier or on the child at all times, because those handles do fail. That's one of the recalls that we know of that's happened with infant carriers, is the handle fails if it's being used to carry. The other thing is that those infant carriers shouldn't be used, like I said, as a crib. It shouldn't be used as a toy. Again, it's a strangulation risk with the straps. Shouldn't be used as a swing to rock the child. And if they fall asleep in that infant carrier, they need to be removed and they need to be placed on a flat surface. And this is really brought home for us here at Safe Kids, and in the state of North Dakota, because of a family that we met. Anders' family suffered a huge tragedy when he was taken to his daycare provider, and he was still a little bit sleepy in his car seat. Mom carried him and his twin sister into the daycare provider. Little sister or twin sister was being removed from her carrier. Anders was still kind of drowsy. And so mom, on her way out said, "Bye, buddy." And that was the last thing that she got to say to her son, because unfortunately, Anders continued to sleep in his infant carrier, and he did slump forward. And like I said, he suffered positional asphyxiation. Anders was nearly a year old. So for me, that really drives home the point that it's not just really little babies that can be at risk for this. He was a very strong young man. He was very, very strong baby. And he just, because of that, extreme relaxation that you experience when you fall asleep, he slumped forward so far that he was unable to breathe. So we have Anders' story as a handout that you can request. It's something that's also on our website. And their family has been so brave and so generous in allowing us to share his story, because it's really one that I think a lot of families, they just don't think of. Carmen, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to mention also on our website, and I can put the link in the chat box. This family actually sought us out to do education on this topic. And about 2 years ago, we created a video with the parents telling their story. I'll put the link to that. It's very sad. Maybe watch it on your lunch hour when you've got some tissue nearby, but it is a great video to show to people. I call this a "you don't know what you don't know" topic. I think, people think of, oh, I have a car seat, oh, baby falls asleep, the whole adage of don't wake a sleeping baby. But if they're in that car seat and it's not installed in the car, you have to wake that sleeping baby. And this is Anders' story is a very compelling one. They live in Bismarck. They're from Grand Forks. Anders was found unresponsive in his car seat, was resuscitated, was air flighted from Bismarck to Fargo and taken off life support 2 days later because of brain death. And so it has impacted a lot of communities in our state, and it's a story that needs to be told over and over again.
Thank you. So like I said before, if the car seat is installed correctly in the car, that baby can sleep in there. We still do recommend about every hour stopping, getting the baby out of there, just making sure that their position hasn't changed. That might be a time for them to go ahead and have a diaper change or a feeding anyway. But if they fall asleep, as long as the angle is correct based on the manufacturer of that car seat, it's okay for them to sleep while you're in transit. And these are some of the resources and their form numbers. So please get that word out for us as well. So just to continue along with the conversation of safe sleep, the safest place for babies to sleep is on a firm mattress, in a crib, or a pack and play. Boxes, dresser drawers, things like that, those are not safe sleep surfaces. We don't encourage that. And we absolutely 100% do not encourage families to share a bed with infants. That is just due to the risk of rolling onto the infant, the adult bedding becoming a covering of their face and that sort of thing. We don't want them on anything soft when they're sleeping either. So no water beds, no adult beds, no sheepskins or fleece, boppies, anything like that. And we want to remove any soft items. We say that safe sleep is really an ABC. A for alone, B on their back, and C in a crib. They should be in a crib with a firm mattress with a tightly fitted sheet, no blankets, anything like that. Now, families are going to question you about how to keep their baby warm. It's North Dakota. It gets very, very cold. If they can't use those blankets that grandma and grandpa provided at the baby shower, what are they supposed to use? We encourage swaddles for babies before they learn how to roll over, and sleep sacks to keep them warm. We want to keep their face and their head completely uncovered. And we don't want them to sleep in anything other than that crib or pack and play. No swinging, sleeping in swings or bouncy chairs, because again, those sit at kind of an angle, and that baby is has a potential for then having positional asphyxia. So we have lots of materials that we can share with you on infant safe sleep. We have information about cribs. We even have information that we can share with you regarding how to refurbish cribs that maybe have been handed down. Oftentimes, grandma and grandpa may want the crib to be used because, great grandfather built it, or it's been in the family for years. Typically, when you've got older cribs, they are no longer meeting those standards. The slats are too spread apart, or they have drop sides. Drop sides are very unsafe because of entrapment and strangulation issues. So we have some tips about how to make those into other pieces of furniture, functional pieces for the household, so that they're not being used in an unsafe way, but they're still utilized. There is a program called Cribs for Kids. I will pop the link into the website into the chat in a couple moments, but Cribs for Kids actually does assist families to get cribs and sleep sacks for their child so that they can sleep safely. Usually what is provided is a pack and play. Pack and plays are wonderful. They're not super expensive items, and those really do provide a safe sleep surface that is portable. That's usually easy for families to get a hold of. We do have a variety of different safe sleep resources. So absolutely tap into any of these. We have a display crib that's a tabletop item that people can use to show what types of cribs are appropriate. We talk to families about safe use of bassinets. So we want to make sure that bassinet is stable, that the frame is locked in its fully locked position. It is not on elevated surfaces or near stairs, and it follows the weight guidelines from the manufacturer. One thing about bassinets that we talk to families about is not using them once an infant starts rolling over or starts showing signs that they're about to roll over. These are much smaller devices. It's important that their stability is kept very, very firm, and we'll start losing stability if that child is moving around a lot in there. And they do typically have some weight guidelines as well. There are some federal standards for play yards, portable cribs, things like that. I did pop in just a little bit ago into the chat the Consumer Product Safety Commission recalls spot. If a family is getting as a hand-me-down a play yard or a crib or something, it might be really, really important to pop onto that website and just check to make sure that it hasn't been recalled, and make sure that it's still safe and viable. If it's got mesh on the sides, make sure that that mesh has been checked so that it doesn't have any tears or holes. And don't add mattresses. Make sure that you're using the mattress that came with that product. If the mattress is missing, maybe contacting the manufacturer and see if you can get a replacement would be a good idea. Strollers and carriages, just like any of the other products that we've talked about, we want to use the safety equipment that's included and use it correctly. So make sure that straps are used. If the child falls asleep in there and there's the ability to recline the seat in the stroller, we encourage that to happen. That way they are placed as flat as possible. And then we want them to be removed from that and placed flat in a crib as soon as possible to continue their nap. We never want a child to be sleeping in an inclined surface. We talked a little bit about high chairs. I know Sarah covered it really, really well, but just noting that a child shouldn't be left alone in a high chair. They need to not be able to push against something that might knock them down. Always use those safety straps. I don't think I can possibly encourage that enough. And bumbo chairs, I know that those made the news a few years back. Bumbo chairs, oftentimes families were using them on elevated surfaces and children were falling out of them and getting injuries. It's really, really important that they are used with their safety strap. That was part of the recall that happened with those products. So if the product they have does not have a safety strap, they should contact the company. And like I said, never ever use them on elevated surfaces. With recall, the recall information, one recall that happened a few years ago was for these boppy loungers. These loungers were recalled after 8 babies died using the product. So families who might potentially have one of those, they can contact the company and get a refund. I only mentioned that. I know it was a recall a few years ago, but sometimes those are things that get handed down. Maybe they got stuck in somebody's basement and somebody hands them down. So it's really, really important to make sure that they're aware of that.
Tina, before we break for lunch, I just want to highlight a couple things that I think is worth mentioning. A couple of years ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with new safe sleep recommendations, and Tina has highlighted several of those. If you go back, Tina, to the slide with the green on the top and the bottom, the safe sleep checklist, those are documents that I would encourage you to either get from us or print yourself. They have, if you can go down that list and kind of check things off, there are 2 recommendations that are new. One of them was around the topic of the wearable blankets things. You can get the kind where you swaddle them where the arms are up like this and wrapped in the swaddle. You can use those up until the point that the child starts to roll over. At the point that they start to roll over, you then want to put them in the ones where their arms come out and through that, so that they can, if they roll over, they can move themselves away from anything that might be dangerous. The other recommendation that came out, and I know that this is that a lot of people are not aware of this standard. It is now recommended that babies room share, not bed share, room share with their parents at least to 6 months of age, preferably up to a year of age. There have been studies that show that it decreases the incidence of SIDS. All of the things that are listed on this checklist are things that are known to decrease the incidence of SIDS. And so I would highly encourage you to look at getting this. And again, this is on our website, or you can contact us and we can send you a stack of them. I will say at that injury prevention virtual workshop that we're going to be doing in March, we are going to have a whole hour on safe sleep. Unfortunately, our child fatalities in the state of North Dakota are on the incline for the number of children that are dying in non-traditional sleep environments. So people that fall asleep with the baby on their chest, or they've put them in a clothes basket with the pillow in it because they didn't have a crib or that kind of thing. Our hope is that hospitals and women's pregnancy centers and public health and WIC programs and, you know, all of the likes of that are screening their patients often. Do you have, and not just say, do you have a safe place for the child to sleep, but do you have a crib or a bassinet or a pack and play? Those are the only options for the baby to sleep in, because we know many people cannot afford it, or many people have the concept that the baby is fine to sleep in their bed, which is far from the truth. And if they don't have it, that Cribs for Kids, again, the link I put in the chat box, there are distribution sites all over the state that they can receive a free pack and play, onesie, and a pacifier. Why the pacifier? It helps to hold the tongue in a forward position. And so it is recommended that they not only be placed on their back to sleep, but that they be placed to sleep with a pacifier in their mouth. So if you're not aware of what those new crib standard or safe sleep standards are, please review this document, because it's important that we as healthcare providers are all sharing that same information, because unfortunately we have way too many children who are dying in our states because parents are not aware of these recommendations. With that, I don't know if we have any questions. We've run over a little bit on time. We are going to give you time to go have some lunch. Tina, do we want to say 1:30? That's 45 minutes. Split the difference between an hour, and can we say 1:30 back at 1:30, everybody?
Yeah, if that works, we will have our presentation start up at 1:30. That'd be great.
All right. If there's any questions and you want to stay on and take yourself off of mute, you sure can. You can put it in the chat, or we can answer it at the end of the day as well. So go have yourself some lunch, and we'll see you back in 45 minutes.